Okay.
Did you want to blur it?
Yeah.
If that's an option here for you.
Yeah. Video setting.
Oh, wait, maybe up here.
Appearance.
No.
Okay.
Oh, wait, background.
Sorry.
I just kneeled on my bed on my knee, just all bruised. Change virtual background, blur.
Great.
Okay.
How do you make it big? I know how to do that. Make it big white.
meeting to order because there's not a quorum just yet. So we need two additional board members in the room to begin a formal meeting. If we do not reach a quorum, can go into informational session, but it's not an official board meeting. Thank you. We'll wait 5 minutes to see if we can obtain a quorum. Good morning. It's 9:36 a.m. We have a quorum. The members present this morning and the New York City Board of Correction, February 28th, 2024 meeting is now in session. Our first order of business is to vote on the agenda for today's board meeting, which board members have received. Will a board member move for a vote to approve the February 28th, 2024 meeting agenda? Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded. Does any member have edits or comments on the agenda? All in favor of approving the February 28th, 2024 agenda? Please, all those in favor? Any objections? No objections. It is moved. Our second order of business is to vote on the draft minutes for the January 10th, 2024 meeting, which board members have received. Will a board member move for a vote to approve the January 10th, 2024 board meeting minutes? Is there a second? Does any member have edits or comments on the minutes? All in favor of approving the January 10th, 2024 board meeting minutes? Any opposed? One abstention. It is so moved. Just some brief remarks on a board tour that I've had a couple of weeks ago with the commissioner to Elmhurst Hospital prison ward. I just wanted to, really recognize, such effort and development that was put into a facility that really takes into mind what this board is moving toward in each and every aspect of what our charter puts forth. I wanted to show the news clip on that so that those who haven't seen it can get a sense of the work that's being done at Elmhurst Hospital and really can serve as a sort of a national model for those who have mental health issues and are incarcerated. So if you can, please.
So this area is the day room area for all the patients that comes here from the Department of Corrections.
Women from Rikers Island step into this ward in Elmhurst Hospital, and they are no longer seen as detainees, but patients.
Once they're here, they're considered patients. They don't say inmate or individual. They are patients that needs help. That's what they are.
They call it D11, an intensive inpatient psychiatric unit for women from Rikers Island, run by Elmhurst Hospital and the Department of Correction. We got an exclusive look inside.
Because it was closed for so long, we decided to enhance the unit and make it safer for patients.
Closed for quite some time, almost 4 years, a casualty of COVID hitting Elmhurst hard. And then a staffing crisis at DOC. On Tuesday, it's slated to reopen.
We were managing as best as we can, during the pandemic without the unit. But I think this brings back equity, and we really need to provide the same service to males and females. So,
And right now in New York City, it's a big topic of mental health, and this is a great place, especially for the females that's incarcerated in DOC custody, for them to come and get the treatment that they need.
The unit is meant to address what is one of the largest challenges gripping the city's Department of Correction, which is already overwhelmed with controversy and violence. For years, the number of detainees on Rikers Island with serious mental illness has been on the rise. In November, 21% of detainees had a serious mental health diagnosis. Now, 12 women in the most need will get care here.
I know that Rikers is really waiting for us to open because they have been treating ladies there that really need the inpatient care. So we anticipate to be full the first few months.
While they were closed, they renovated every fixture and window, all geared to minimize self-harm. The blankets, too.
It's very difficult to make a loop and put it anywhere, besides that there is no anchor points here.
None of the doors to the rooms close.
They're never locked in. This is not solitary confinement it's not a jail setting. It's a medical psychiatric setting.
There will be programs like art therapy and yoga. The changes here, they hope, will help bring change to Rikers as well.
That's 12 persons that could get help that they truly need.
Courtney Gross, New York 1.
Morning, everyone. I'll start with introductions of our new staff members. I'm very pleased to welcome new BOC monitoring staff to help us further the board's charter mandated duties. We have 2 new level correctional standards review specialists. Ms. Shakira Porter has a Bachelor of Science in Public Health and Psychology and served as an associate correctional counselor with the NYC Department of Correction for 4 years. And Ms. Tamar Scott has worked in the criminal justice social services field for over 14 years and served as a youth development specialist with the New York City Administration for Children's Services. And we're very glad to have them aboard. We know their contributions to ensuring that minimum standards are met and people are treated with humanity will be challenging, but very worthwhile. And then now I'm going to give a brief update on some topics that we've discussed in previous meetings, just to allow people to know what action steps we've taken since then. Regarding sick call, following the discussions at the November and January board meetings regarding sick call, the board's research team is in the early stages of an assessment of sick call. To that end, DOC, CHS, and BOC staff will meet in March to address lingering questions regarding sick call and the CHS triage line, their respective roles, and compliance with the board's sick call minimum standard. The research team's assessment will focus, for example, on the operational definitions of sick call and the triage line, the process and timeline from the moment a person in custody calls to be placed on sick call to being seen by a medical professional, any differences in these processes among facilities, and follow-up visits. Some of the preliminary goals of this project is for the board to receive a comprehensive list of all people in custody who requested sick call, were seen for sick call on a specific day, missed sick call appointments, and the reason why they missed sick call appointments. Given sick call access concerns, a primary goal of this assessment is for DOC and CHS to improve their sick call operations and processes through a comprehensive joint action plan to be implemented in the coming months. And BOC staff will evaluate these efforts and convey the results at a later public board meeting. Regarding linen exchange, at January's public meeting, the department and the board agreed to a meeting to discuss the operations of uniform and linen exchange. Since then, BOC's monitoring unit reported to all open jails across Rikers Island and assessed the clothes box, laundry, and intake areas in preparation for the meeting with DOC staff. And I thank the BOC team for their work. And I can give an update that yesterday, our Deputy Executive Director Blackman met with Associate Commissioner Pace and had a very productive meeting. They'll continue to evaluate efforts towards compliance with the board's minimum standards in this area. And again, we'll convey any updates following that meeting and actions taken at a future board meeting. Next, we share our deepest condolences with the families of department staff who have died since the board's January meeting. The staff who have passed are Officer Shauna Nolden, retired Officer Charles Turgino, retired Officer Josetta Walker, retired Officer Dolores Simmons, retired Officer Dwayne Floyd, retired Assistant Deputy Warden John O'Brien, retired Captain Lynn Winston Ellis, retired Officer Roy Valentine Wallace III, retired Officer Richard Moore, retired Captain Christopher Spears, retired Officer Anthony Robinson, and retired officer Lenora Davis Young. The board was also saddened to learn of the latest death in custody. The board expresses condolences to the family and loved ones of Manuel Luna. Mr. Luna, age 30, died in GRVC on January 19, 2024. Mr. Luna was found unresponsive in his cell by DOC staff at approximately 8:47 p.m. that day. His cause of death is currently pending confirmation from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. And as with all deaths in custody, the board is actively investigating and will issue a public report on our findings. Next, an update on census data. As of February 27, 2024, there were approximately 6,251 individuals in department custody, and that's a 2.8% increase from January 1st of 2024, when the census was 6,081. I'll give a breakdown by facility as of February 27th. In Bellevue Hospital Prison Ward, the census was 55. Elmhurst Hospital Prison Ward, 7. EMTC, 1,324. In GRVC, 959. In NIC, 270. In OBCC, 1,470. In RESH, 157. In RMSC, 365. In RNDC, 970, and in West Facility, 674. And next, I have an update regarding reporting. The board's Committee on Deaths, Near Deaths, and Serious Injuries issued its latest report on deaths in custody on Friday, February 9th, 2024. The report includes the Special Investigation Unit's findings regarding the deaths of William Johnstone, Curtis Davis, Donnie Ubiera, and Manish Kunwar. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner confirmed that Mr. Davis died by suicide and Mr. Ubiera died from acute methadone intoxication. The official causes of death of Mr. Johnstone and Mr. Kunwar remain outstanding as of the date of the report's publishing. Similar to prior reports, the committee highlighted issues related to insufficient touring, supervision of housing areas, inefficient use of tour wands, and inaccurate or incomplete logbook entries. The report also notes incorrect practices regarding the removal of cell window coverings, unsecured cells, sick call production, Narcan availability in the A stations, among other concerns. The committee made 17 recommendations to DOC and CHS with the aim of avoiding future operational failures. This latest report is available on the board's website, along with prior reports on deaths in custody. And the next death report, which will include investigations of the deaths of Chima Williams and Manuel Luna, will be published in the coming months. On February 21st, 2024, the board issued its report presenting findings and recommendations in connection with its assessment of the department's use of chemical agents. Board staff analyzed 50 incidents from October 2023, during which DOC uniform staff deployed chemical agents, or OC. Among the findings, the board highlighted policy violations, concerns about practices and trends, including a significant increase in the use of chemical agents in recent years, the use of chemical agents from prohibited distances, and the use of chemical agents on people attempting to hang themselves. The report makes 14 recommendations with the aim of improving DOC practices, including compliance with mandatory annual chemical agent trainings, increasing the use of body-worn cameras in the jails, and increasing the occurrence of required mental health interventions prior to the application of anticipated force by DOC uniform staff. The report will be an agenda topic at the board's March 12th meeting, where we expect DOC and CHS to inform the board and the public about what actions the agencies have taken and will take to address the concerns highlighted in the board's report. Members of the public can can access that report on the board's website. And that concludes the BOC staff updates. I'll turn it over to Board Member Pitts for an update from the Programs and Education Committee.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. In August 2023, I, along with other members of the Programs and Education Committee, met with several criminal justice advocates associated with the HALT movement. A reoccurring theme during our discussion emphasized the need to remind custodial staff that individuals in custody are human beings, often coming from the same neighborhoods as the correction officer. It became evident that incorporating the perspectives of criminal justice advocates with prior incarceration experience into the recruit correction officer training could enhance that understanding. Board Chair Sampson, present at the meeting, endorsed my suggestion to submit a training proposal to the Correction Academy. The proposed seminar, tentatively titled How to Engage with People in Custody, would be led by a criminal justice advocate with a history of incarceration. I submitted the proposal to Dr. Gonzalez, who was then the Deputy Commissioner for Training and Development, who forwarded it to Louis Molina, who was then the Correction Commissioner. He approved the initiative. On January 9th, 2024, at the NYPD Training Academy, 72 recruits participated in the Criminal Justice Advocates How to Engage with People in Custody seminar. The training was conducted by criminal justice advocate Mr. Jack Davis, and he used group discussions, role plays, and scenarios to present his message. The key topics that were covered were recognizing that people in custody come from the same community as officers and should be treated with humanity. Above all, be professional, avoid forming friendships with people in custody, and follow the rules. A positive or encouraging word by an officer to a person in custody can make a difference. And Mr. Davis shared his particular experience when he was incarcerated on Rikers. An officer noticed that he was an avid reader and said to him, well, look, you like to read, why not enroll in the GED program? And that's what he did. And currently, he is in a master's program. Following the seminar, 67 of the 72 recruit officers and one correction captain provided valuable feedback through evaluation forms. The highlights of the evaluations were on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the least and 10 being the most. 70% rated the overall presentation between 10 and 9. 90% rated the that the information was relevant to what they believe their duties are going to be. I need to share that these officers had not yet gone on OJT. So they were presuming. Along with rating the seminar, the participants wrote their key takeaways from the seminar. And these are just a few of them. And they are: be confident, understand your power as a correction officer, treat people in custody with dignity and respect. Some people in custody are predators and cannot be reached. Some people in custody behave badly as a cry for help. Don't allow people in custody to walk all over you. And most of all, always be aware and be professional. Mr. Davis asked them what were their biggest fears. And some of them were not making it home, being assaulted, loss of life, reporting a fellow officer for bringing in contraband, causing harm to someone, not being able to do the job, trying their best to do the job and getting into trouble. Conclusion: the Programs and Education Committee is going to request that the Correction Academy consider the seminar becoming a permanent part of recruit officer training. complemented by an overview of the Board of Correction. Additionally, we are going to ask that there be a post on the job training evaluation of the seminar's impact, and that is our recommendation. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Any questions for Programs Committee, Board Member Pitts? Thank you,
Thank
Board
you.
Member Pitts. Right now, we go into,
Excuse me, Chair, I want to make a comment on the Executive Director's presentation, just to say that there has been about an 11% increase in population in the Department of Correction over the 2 years of the Adams administration. And then that's a serious increase and counter to policy, but demonstrated in practice. Thank you.
okay, thank you for your comments, so noted. We'll go to PIC public comments at this time. For those, that's Board Member Cohen. He's remote right now. He just made his comments. So PIC public comments.
Yes, my name is James Lumpkin. Currently housed at Old Boy, OBCC, 141-2300-846. At this time, I don't feel safe because you have a security unit over here who is being used in an unprofessional manner to shake inmates down who just want to go get a bite to eat, who has a right to eat in peace. But for some reason, these officers line up by the mess hall every day under the order of Captain Kristen, which is a female, and tell and point people out who to shake down that she personally have problems with, not that committed acts. Because most of us is on the dorm side and our classification is low and have been out of trouble for a while, or haven't been in trouble at all, some of us. So, you know, it's just unreal to see these officers coming here every day with the mindset of start with someone who's just trying to go get a regular routine meal that's part of the program, and that hasn't been in trouble or caused these people any problems in the facility. You know, but as I stated, it's just unreal. The living condition is inhumane. We haven't got wrecked for about 3 days straight since the snow came. They claim it's too cold for us to go outside. No one put salt down in the yard for us to go outside. It's just unreal. Yeah, it's this New York City jail. You know, it's just like a shit show here. It's a shit show here. With 311 complaints, it's not getting followed up on when they get sent in. You can take a look at the logbooks yourself. Look at the video cameras. None of these sergeants is coming to investigate these issues that's being complained against DOC staff until, you know, something bad go on and these officers are putting their hands on people in here, taking them in the bathroom when they off camera and saying the inmate swung on them. Initially, they hit the inmate. And what was it for the inmate to do if a grown man hit him? Not that he had typically assaulted the officer, and that's what he wanted to do. These guys would slap you in your face and tell you to lay on the floor and kick you in your nuts. And if you are a man, you're not going to do that because he has no authority to do that. Well, who's to say I was right or I was wrong if no camera is there? And they won't even put on their body camera. Yeah, like they won't turn on their body cameras because they claim they were searching. No, they came in there to beat someone, to mess up, beat somebody to F up. You know what I'm saying? And it's a show if this happened, Tom.
Yes, hello. My name is Jason, Jason. Last name Argentina, like the South American country. ARGENTINA. I am incarcerated at jail in Rikers Island, OBCC, and housing unit 7 floor. I'm constantly complaining about inhaling poisonous secondary smoke because the inmates smoke all day and the officers are not infracting them. removing them. My bleeding is labored, and I'm having a constant headache. I've complained numerous times to no avail. This is completely unacceptable as I have a right to breathe clean air. I need something done about this as soon as possible. My booking case number is 141-2000.
The caller has hung up.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jonathan Lopez. My booking case is 141-230-1889. On January 11th at approximately 5:15 p.m., I'm in OBCC, and we was followed up to forever by some COs, which was a chance for them to assault us. Me and 2 other detainees was assaulted in the bathroom. I was slapped. I was stripped butt naked. I was kicked in my anus. One of the COs is Stanford Shield 6769. The second CO didn't have a name on his shield, but his shield number was 13099. And the third CO I didn't see because when I turned around, he has kicked me in the anus. If it's possible to get an investigation or somebody to come visit us so we can speak more about it, I'll greatly appreciate it. Thank you and have a blessed day.
The caller has hung up.
Hello, my name is Paul Alexander, and I was trying to get some help from the city council. I was violently assaulted here in Rikers Island. I was sitting down playing chess, and the inmate came running over, and he hit me in my eye socket. He broke the bones in my eye, and there was a lot of internal bleeding, and there was a lot of negligence involved. The guard who was working this area, he left the area, and then after he knocked me out, rather than bringing me for medical help, they waited 24 hours before they brought me to the emergency room. There was a lot of bleeding on the skull and the broken bones in my skull. And the worst part about this is how nothing was done about it, or nothing is being done about it. And then the inmate that they put in the unit was a highly violent inmate. He shouldn't have been put in this unit. This is all minimum security inmates. And here's a guy that has a history. He already did time, 25 years for murder, and now he's back for another murder. And they're just putting him in this unit. And I really need some help with this assault. I can't seem to get any medical help. I have double vision that's not going away. I have severe bad headaches. I have dizziness. I have memory loss. And it was because of the lack of medical help for so long after it happened. And then a few other issues too. Please don't ignore the call. Paul Alexander, Rikers Island Jail.
The caller has hung up.
Okay, thank you. Public comments on treated lines for custody. We will now turn to DOC for updates on the items listed on the agenda. Jasmine will provide background on the substantive issues, followed by responses from DOC executive staff.
Thank you. I just wanted to note about the people in custody comments that we just heard. We have referred them to DOC, so they're looking into them to address the issues that we just heard. And I'll go on to the item on the agenda.
I'll just add to that. Anytime there's a PIC comment or complaint, each matter is investigated after every meeting to DOC for follow-up or by BOC staff. So just wanted to note that for the record. So thank you. Hold on one second.
I just, for the record, I just want to express again my concern that when we hear the complaints of PIC, I really feel their name or our booking number should be blocked out for retaliation. And I think that's just for their protection. They're already calling in with what has occurred to them. And if us not knowing what the retaliation is and why DOC is investigating, I think it's for their safety and security, and that's part of DOC's role to keep people safe and secure while they're in the custody of DOC. So I'm going to ask again that we redact those names and booking numbers of individuals.
Yeah, I think that was mentioned previously, but I think, Melissa, you can confirm, I think because of law department saying we can't. So there's, unless there's a further review by the law department, it has to be provided. Yes, go ahead, Dr. Bernard.
My other concern is separate from an investigation about the incident reported is if people are using the names of involved officers, that there may be retaliation going forward for having made the complaint. And I'm very concerned about making sure that those PIC who call in are not do not continue to be in housing areas where they are going to be exposed to the officers that they've named in these complaints.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bedard. Any other board members had a comment on this matter? Okay, but again, due to law department, not opinion, but direction, we are unable to block booking number or the name of the PICs that are calling in for comment.
I'll just to clarify, I totally understand that, but I think I'm just not okay with it. I think we have to actually push back on why that is very important. And I think there's precedent across maybe not just New York City, but just for the record, I think and I would love to partner with you as the chair and a vice chair to actually address this with the law department on the necessity to do that. Because even in a court of law, when you have a witness, the witness name is acted until you go to trial. So I think we can use those leverage just because it's DOC that people don't have its extenuating rights as they was in the public. The majority of people have not been found guilty. So I'm still innocent and all my rights should be protected.
So hearing that, Vice Chair Hoskins, I think that what we would like to do is get a further review from the law department and to arrange a meeting with the head of corporation counsel and the team to address the concerns of the board with respect to that.
Yes, we will arrange that before the next meeting in March. So the board has asked the department to share its plan for addressing complaints regarding lack of access to indoor and outdoor recreation and limited recreation time. As stated in subdivision A of section 1-06 of the board's rules, recreation is essential to good health and contributes to reducing tensions within a facility. People in custody shall be provided with adequate indoor and outdoor recreational opportunities. The board's rules set forth minimum standards for recreation, including the following. An outdoor recreation area must allow for direct access to sunlight and air. Recreation periods shall be at least 1 hour. Only time spent at the recreation area shall count toward that hour. Recreation shall be available 7 days per week in the outdoor recreation area, except in inclement weather when the indoor recreation area shall be used. The department shall make available to people in custody an adequate amount of equipment during the recreation period. Upon request, each facility shall provide people in custody with appropriate outer garments in satisfactory condition, including coat, hat, and gloves when they participate in outdoor recreation during cold or wet weather conditions. People shall be permitted to engage in recreation activities within cell corridors and tiers, day rooms, and individual housing units, including but not limited to table games, exercise programs, arts and crafts activities. Recreation taking place within these areas shall supplement but not fulfill the requirements of 1 hour outdoor recreation 7 days a week. A person's access to recreation may be denied for up to 5 days only due to imminent safety and security risks, which must be recorded and transmitted to the board within 1 business day of the restriction. Any limits imposed on a person's access to recreation must be approved by the chief of the department. And I'll share some of BOC staff's findings on recreation.
If I may, Jasmine, just for the record, and I won't cite the previous meeting, I would like to have the department and also board to be clear on direct access to sunlight and air. I think there's questions about the definitions on that we'll have to address as a board in the future. And so I would like to get some work on that early.
Noted.
Yeah, thank you.
I will. So BOC staff have been monitoring the operation of recreation in the different facilities and will continue to closely monitor this area in the coming months. From December 1st to January 22nd, there was a total of 82 grievances submitted to the department regarding recreation. People in custody have reported not receiving the mandated 1 hour of daily recreation, with some experiencing extended periods without access to recreation at all. At EMTC, there are people who have not had outdoor recreation in over 1 year. Grievances mention issues such as denial of recreation for weeks, inconsistent scheduling, and difficulties accessing recreation due to conflicting schedules with other activities like law library, religious services, and visits. Overall, the recurring theme in these complaints is the deprivation of the mandated recreation time, posing concerns about the well-being of the incarcerated population across all facilities on Rikers. During the weeks of January 15th and January 22nd, BOC staff observed conditions and concerns expressed by both people in custody and department staff regarding recreation across facilities on Rikers. A consistent concern from department staff is that they need more staff to efficiently operate recreation. They are constantly shift reduced. They get tasked with other assignments like court production, resulting in delays in recreation affordability. The consistent concern expressed by people in custody is that there is inconsistent access to daily recreation as required by the board's minimum standards. As I mentioned, board staff will continue to investigate these issues and do a full assessment so we can make recommendations to the department for improvements. And I'll turn it to the department staff to address. Yeah.
I just want to ask one clarifying question, which is that there's not an active executive order pertaining to this standard, right?
That's correct.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, members of the board. Before we begin, I want to thank the board for acknowledging the member and retired members of service whom we have lost since the last meeting, including the premature death of Correction Officer Shauna Nolden. She was a member of service for 8 years who lost her life at the age of 37 after bravely battling a long illness. I also want to express my deepest condolences on the passing of Mr. Manuel Luna. The department joins the board in extending our sympathy to the loved ones of all who have passed. When we last met, I described my vision for the department and my commitment to leading with empathy, fairness, and accountability. Today, I want to highlight some of the changes that have been implemented to better align our actions with these goals, as well as share some of DOC's recent accomplishments. As commissioner, I firmly believe that to lead the jails, you need to tour the jails. To that end, I have instituted a mandatory touring schedule for all civilian and uniform leadership. On these tours, My team is expected to speak with staff and people in custody, address any issues that they see in real time, and report back to me on their positive observations, as well as areas of concern. I hold myself to the same standard and continue to tour our facilities as well. Regular touring is critical for our success. If we are to uphold our commitment to creating a safer, more humane environment, then we must confront the conditions within our jails. As leaders, we must listen, and we must develop solutions to problems informed by those on the ground. Moreover, we know that among the best paths to violence reduction is ensuring that minimum standards are met. It is incumbent on department leadership to monitor the provisions of those services firsthand and to speak up when our commitment to our population and our staff is not met. Second, and critical to the goals I've mentioned, I want to highlight that the department recently received a grant for $180,000 from the New York State Office of Mental Health Suicide Prevention Center to expand wellness programs for staff. Our care unit will spearhead the grant, and it should improve mental health in the workplace. As I mentioned during last month's meeting, I serve this department with a deep commitment to our staff. Being a correction officer is a demanding job, perhaps the most demanding in city government. The men and women of the department must be supported as we strive towards a more safe and humane jail system. Third, I want to acknowledge the hard work of all DOC staff involved in the reopening of the hospital prison ward at Elmhurst Hospital. I was pleased to join several members of the board earlier this month on a tour of the unit. During our tour, we had an opportunity to see the physical layout of the unit and the infrastructure improvements that have been made since it was last used. We spoke with DOC and Elmhurst Hospital staff, as well as persons in custody. I'm grateful that women in custody who are experiencing acute psychiatric illness are now able to be housed and treated appropriately. This is a major step in improving the care of seriously mentally ill individuals, and we will continue with our partners at CHS to provide this population with supportive and appropriate care. I am energized by the opportunities for change at the Department of Correction and for the opportunity to share them with you today. I believe a constructive partnership between the department and the board is critical to providing better services to our population, as well as a better environment for our staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My team and I are available to answer your questions.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, for your comments. I think that as we look for questions from board members, I like to say that the notion of mandatory touring for your leadership is so noted, and maybe we should take a lesson as this board and maybe impose some mandatory touring.
I could put you on the schedule.
Okay, yeah, and I can say that myself personally, there's only one facility, I think Staten Island, I have not toured, and I plan to do that in short order and then start cycling back again. So it's very important to tour. Any questions for the commissioner? Okay.
There was a question about exercise, which was not answered yet. So.
Hold on one second, Dr. Cohen. I'll get back to you in a second, okay?
Hi, Commissioner, and team from DOC. You know, in my experience, when I go to RNDC, I hear exactly what we are. Lack of predictability by anyone. A lot of it impacted by staffing, but a lot of it impacted by poor communication across the. Can you talk to us about particularly around the access to recreation that is so important in our NDC. What is your sense of what could be improved and how you going about it?
Chief.
Up.
At our RMC, effectively yesterday, we started a rollout of any housing areas, recreation yard to ensure more people. Started yesterday, as I said, it been a few outdoor housing areas. Session during the day would increase staffing presence. Initiative went well, and we will continue. So although that we ran it yesterday went well for the housing area, when persons in custody, this approach will not be possible for all housing areas to ensure it's implemented across the appropriate housing areas to ensure that we have safety and security for our staff as well as persons in custody.
And the idea of blending people in custody, is that a more efficient way of attaining, or it is because you're trying to create more relationships? I mean, what is behind this?
It's a more efficient way
Okay.
to make sure we get the housing areas out for recreation with the help of the Office of Security, the Correction Intelligence Unit, and the security team. That's what we're doing to make sure everyone gets recreation, but we have to do it in a safe manner.
And you're doing this because you don't have enough staff to do it the other way? There's not enough spaces? It's part of a philosophy? I'm trying to figure out, what is it that you guys need kind of reduce the idleness that I encounter whenever I go to RC?
It's all of the above.
Which one would be the one, if you were to get one thing that would make it better for RNDC people in custody, what would?
For RNDC custody is the staffing, but it's all of the above as far as safety and security of the persons in custody, staff, staffing ratio. As I stated before, we can't put everyone in the recreation together because of the SRG. So we want to make sure that we communicate with our stakeholders such as CIB, the Office of Security, as well as the security staff to make sure everybody get recognition. So it's all of the above. But to pick one at this current time, I cannot do that.
Okay, but staffing seems to be a priority. What about space? And I know in the school, there's a significant amount of young students who want to go to school, but I think you guys didn't have enough space. There was an idea of opening an additional annex. Is that happening?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to pass it over to DC Blaine.
Good morning. So we just, Deputy Commissioner Patrick Ben, head of Fleet Facilities Construction. So we just opened Mod 9, which now allows full access after full complete renovation by my staff, which allows more classrooms and more access to programs.
Great news, thank you.
Yes, Dr. Cohen.
You said that there's been no EMTC recreation for extended period of time. Why is that? Does the department just why is that? Is there in that's my first question. Yeah. Can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So as of yesterday, an update is that the contract is now officially at the controller's office for registration. This generally takes about a 30-day process, but we spoke to them yesterday, reached out to them, and we hope to have it within the next 2 weeks. We already spoke to the contractor as well, had them on site. They did all the final measurements. The plant is set to open in about 2 weeks as well. Due to weather, the asphalt plant's closed for the winter season, so they're about to open back up. And the contractor has assured us once they receive the registration notice and they're going to proceed right away. And we hope to have it all paved. And then additional to that, we're now going to divide that yard. It's been divided into two large pens for the blending purposes and allowing everybody to rec at once. We're going to now divide it into 4 pens. We already have the fence contractor working on that, and they gave us the quote. We received it yesterday. We're now ready to process that. We already have a standing contract with them, so we're going to deduct funds from that standing contract to make this happen, so that we can have the ability to use the whole yard.
Do you have a?
One second, Dr. Bedard. Continue, Dr. Cohen.
Sorry.
Yes, it's okay. Do you have a plan as the department to make sure that everybody has exercise every day? Or you feel that that's being met, or is it something that you are not able to do and do not plan to do? I understand that you're planning to make physical changes to EMTC, but our report suggests that there are serious problems with access to exercise throughout the department. Is this something that we should expect to continue, or do you have a plan to resolve that? And then what's the time frame for that?
Thank you for that question, Dr. Cohen. My name is Nancy Savasta. I'm the acting general counsel for the department. We have challenges to the provision of rec, and we acknowledge that here today, and we welcome the board's feedback and the feedback from the persons in our custody. We are strategizing, as DC Ben spoke of, and Chief Rembert, with new ways to approach and provide rec by blending houses, subdividing the rec yards. We are committed as an agency to meeting minimum standards, as the commissioner said, and providing access to recreation on a daily basis to every person in our custody. That strategy faces a challenge with the planned closure of Rikers Island and the shutdown of some of the facilities. And we continue to strategize on a daily basis of ways to maximize the use of the limited space that we have available at this time.
So that means you're not able to provide it, and there are structural reasons why you will not be able to provide it for some period of time. Is that right?
That our goal every day is to provide access to recreation to every person in our custody. And we strategize as a leadership team daily on the ways to maximize that. DC Ben's team is making repairs and subdividing the existing yards. And we have strategies to provide rec in other locations that I believe Chief Rembert can speak to.
Thank you. So I explained to you about the RNDC, how we are blending housing areas with the help of CIB, Office of Security, and the security staff. In reference to NIC and West Facility, they seem to be for dorms 17, 18, and 19. We don't have a problem with AMKC main yard recreation. GRBC, there's 2 separate recreation schedule, one's for mental observation persons in custody, as well as for general population. The mental health observation person in custody is having no problems whatsoever. We have, not only are they getting recreation for the 1 hour of the minimum standards, they're requesting for more recreation, not that they don't have recreation. When we speak about OBCC, there are 3 main recreation yards. One is in the tower, one is in the annex, and we have 2 recreations in the main, 2 separate recreations. When we talk about Resh, Rosa Basinga, level 1 goes to recreation and individual recreation pens. Level 2 goes out to recreation yards by housing area, by tier. And that's where we at right now. And we will continue to adjust and make any changes as needed as possible.
Okay, Dr. Bedard, and then sorry, Dr. Bedard, Mr. Ramos, Jackie, Ms. Hoskins.
So I'm hearing that there are a few different obstacles currently to getting people rec every day. There are structural ones related to physical plant issues that sound like they are not things that can be remediated overnight, but that you have plans for. And I think the board would welcome having those plans in writing with a timeline expected so that we can follow up on that. The second is a staffing concern about having adequate staffing to be able to get people outside. That is an ongoing challenge nestled in the staffing challenges that you face more broadly. I think, again, would really appreciate hearing what your plan is specifically for being able to staff up for rec going forward. The third is that's come to our attention several times, is that people are being inconsistently scheduled such that they are scheduled for rec at the same time that they are scheduled for law, library, for visits, et cetera, in a way that effectively denies them their right to rec because they have other obligations or places that they have to be. My concern there is that that feels like something the department, that's within the department's authority to fix in the next few days by looking at scheduling. I think we'd really appreciate a plan around that. And then the fourth one that I hear is from PIC when I tour is we heard that the minimum standard is that rec can be denied for up to 5 days as disciplinary intervention for an infraction. We routinely hear when we tour that people are being denied rec for much longer when there are lock-ins for entire housing areas that go on for more than 5 days at a time. Putting aside the concern that I have about lock-ins for entire housing areas that go in for more than 5 days at a time, that feels like a clear violation of this particular minimum standard. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and also how you're tracking that to make sure that that doesn't continue going forward.
Thank you for the question. So a few weeks ago, Associate Commissioner Pace initiated a daily rec stat schedule spreadsheet, a grid, to ensure that the PICs are getting their recreation. This is being provided to AC Pace office of facility operations on a daily basis from the facilities.
That's to address the dueling schedule problem.
Correct.
Okay, and is that working?
Well, it started 2 weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago. So I would say that based on the information obtained right now, it seems to be working. However, there will be adjustments, and we can address it in real time if there's an issue.
And also, we are implementing an audit process on all minimum standards that we're meeting. It is a work in progress, and we acknowledge that we have some struggles, but we will provide you with the information that you need. As we are looking at it as well, we will provide it to you.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thanks.
Board Member Ramos.
I'd like to apologize for being late, but the train's coming from the Bronx, so it's happening. I intended to be here on time, but I couldn't wait to get here because I wanted to congratulate Commissioner staff for the tour that we received at Elmhurst Hospital. To look at and to see and to witness the dedication, professionalism of the staff that is providing the service at Elmhurst, and the facility. It's so beautiful and clean. And not only that, but also the ability to see staff mingling with people that were detained there, but also the concern that they had for an individual, a young lady who was expecting and they were so dedicated, to see the outcome of the situation, but also to be able to interview the captain that was, I think you saw a video of the captain. We miss out on a lot of things, good things, and so does the media. And I would hope that they could publicize situations like that and programs like that are going on at Elmhurst and other places within the Department of Correction. It always bothers me to see negative publicity of the department as a totality, knowing that all of that is not factual. Okay, that I see positive situations going on and the professionalism of the people who are carrying those duties and responsibilities within the department. So I needed to highlight that. The other thing is, I'm a physical ed major, believe it or not. And I was next acrobat in the whole 9 yards. And I believe in physical activity. And I believe that the most activity that we can give the people that we have in custody and the ability to be able to participate in recreation and basketball and all kinds of physical activity. The less time they have to think about when they go to bed of thinking of hurting themselves or hurting anybody else. So the quicker we can do something to implement the facilities so that they could participate in physical activities, the better it is for us in totality. The other thing is this, I'm concerned about what happens to those kids that we have within the four walls of corrections. And a lot of those kids are tremendous athletes, and we should allow them to exercise those activities as much as we can. And that will make your jobs a lot easier, in day-to-day basis. Lastly, I talk too much, by the way. I'm concerned about recruitment. And I'm concerned about staffing. We need, and also involving staff who are damn good athletes also to participate with these kids within these facilities. Not these kids, I call everybody kids because I'm old enough to be their grandfather. But the fact is that I think it's important to also get the correction officers that have that facility to participate with those people that we have within the four walls and programs as well. And basically, that's it. But I had to congratulate the Department of Correction for what we witnessed over at Elmhurst. And by the way, that video should be shared with everybody so that everybody could see what really goes on within those four walls, especially dealing with those people who need the facility, the mental health unit, and the dedication that they present in dealing and working with them on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Board Member Ramos. But Jackie, sure.
Thank you. And I will also start out on a really positive note. On a recent visit, we had, Rachel and I had the opportunity to see the annex at RNDC during the first, I believe it was the first week it was open, and it was really encouraging to see classrooms filled, and they're not overfilled, but filled, and the new space in use. So I commend you on that and look forward to future visits there. I'd also like to follow up on Rachel's question specifically around EMTC and say it's very encouraging to hear that the contract is with the controller's office, and hopefully it won't take the full 30 days to register and you'll be able to proceed. And it would be really good to understand what the timeline is on completion of that work, and how we are working to push that forward as quickly as it can possibly proceed, as we have heard and reported on deep concerns around folks at EMTC not receiving outdoor rec for very, very extended periods of time. The other question that I'd like to add to that is I appreciate the efforts that you've all spoken about in terms of maximizing the space that you have and being strategic about using the limited spaces that you have for rec. And I also appreciate Joe's comments regarding the need to have space to move around and to exercise. And along those lines, I would like a further explanation of the subdivision of the yard, the plans for the subdivision of the yard at EMTC, and how large those subdivided spaces will be, and how you're working to ensure that folks both have access to outdoor rec and have access to adequate space to move around and be outdoors. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I'll be able to put both in writing, both share the plans, the drawings of the rec yards, the sizes of them and the measurements, and as well as the construction schedule and get it out to you guys as soon as possible.
Just one second, just in follow-up to, since we're on the presentation of plans, I'd like to, just based on hearing board members' comments thus far, suggest that by April 15th, that a comprehensive plan on recreation be submitted and reviewed by the board before our May board meeting. So April 15th would be adequate time. And that can be operational and concept with respect to impact on recreation. Vice Chair Haas.
And my comments are more so as I just like to make sure, like when I look at the makeup of Rikers Island, each facility almost has to operate as so you have these multiple jails, which is, I'm just gonna be honest, it's not normal. But I think what we're hearing when you say facility construction, capacity, safety and security, lack of opportunities is even more urgent of why barrel-based facilities are a necessity to actually bring us up to par. But I also want to challenge us as a city, as a board, as a Department of Corrections. When we talk about staffing issues, a lot of times, as a person who's been formerly incarcerated, as a person who has worked in Department of Corrections, worked for the Department of Justice, are we even looking at the population we serve to be employed in that? Because if we're saying people are not, the worst mistake they've made, people have the opportunity to change, and we believe in the work we're doing, are we making those opportunities? Because we have formerly incarcerated people in New York City who have went on and are actually on city council. So how are we actually demonstrating our still being oppressive to the services invested in? So I just wanted that on the record. From an HR perspective, are we actually following federal rules and not having a blanket policy of no?
Well, thank you, for your important insight and comments, Vice Chair. And it has been noted, and as chair, I have made some action in that direction as well for the board in hiring perhaps formerly incarcerated. Leave it.
Comment. I mean, thank you, Chair, for asking for a report or a plan. And Commissioner, maybe talk about, there have been many moments in the past where DOC have actually had significant providers kind of help and provide services. Just hearing the chief talk about those challenges of commingling different units. She's coming at it from a perspective of safety and security, which is your job, but it could be an opportunity to have, folks in the community, credible messengers and others be part of that process, being very intentional. And I hope that your plan includes that. If you have need for additional recreational contracts or support, please say so. You're not going to be able to do all of it on your own. No agency in New York City does. And I'm hoping that I can see innovation around connecting to community providers, connecting to the wealth of resources of New York City, and to the wealth of people who want to be helpful in the jails, like our former acrobat. Thank you.
So I just want to note that as I was appointed commissioner, I reached out to Fortune and Osborne and asked them to return to assist if they could. And as of Monday, Fortune has been back with us and assisting us in EMTC. They are dedicated to the population in EMTC, both sentenced and detained, and providing transitional planning services, employment services. They're assisting the men, the fathers in custody, and also working on alternatives to incarceration. So they just started back on Monday, and so I will keep you posted on that as well.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from board members?
Is that being funded by the administration? The Fortune program?
No, they're self-funding it.
They're self-funding it. So the city decided to cut out Fortune and Osborne, and Fortune is volunteering to supply services.
I reached out to the organizations and I let them know that we wanted them back into our facilities to assist. They are back to assist.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. So if there's no other questions for the department, and thank you, Commissioner. Department will go to CHS updates at this time.
There's one more department update. We've also asked the department to share its plan for addressing the fire safety concerns outlined in the board's report on the April 6, 2023 North Infirmary fire. I'll turn it over to the department.
Hi, good morning. I'm just going to read a brief statement that I prepared in regards to this. Excuse me, I'm battling a cold. Good morning. I am Deputy Commissioner Patrick Ben, in charge of facilities and fleet administration at the New York City Department of Correction. Since I came on board in May of 2023, I focused FSU, Fire Safety Unit, and our licensed New York City engineers on the importance of fire safety. I come to this role with over 15 plus years of experience in fire and life safety. Most recently, the past 5 years have been in New York City Health and Hospitals. My goal for the correctional services is to bring that standard of fire safety to the correctional services in the Department of Correction. I'm keeping all my guys, everybody is up to the same standards that they would have been in health and hospitals. But it requires fair treatment. So we acknowledge the reason why people may feel frustrated and compelled to set a fire and break sprinkler heads. The department holds persons in custody accountable for setting fires and damaging property. However, we implore people in custody not to resort to breaking the sprinkler head or starting a fire, as they endanger themselves and those around them. My team works around the clock on a daily basis to replacing broken sprinkler heads, time and resources that could be used elsewhere. Making critical improvements to aging infrastructure of our facilities, making the facilities safer for everyone. Some improvements since I've come on towards fire safety that have been made. First, we replaced the fire pump in NYC with a brand new fire pump. We removed fire sources, switching the mop heads over to microfiber mop heads from the cotton, which cannot burn. We removed outlets from PIC areas where the outlets are not necessary except for medical devices. We repaired smoke detector systems as well as sprinkler systems. We're in the process of installing a brand new fire alarm system in West Facility Springs. We also are piloting a mobile application to support required weekly and monthly fire inspections. And finally, we also brought in retired fire FDNY Battalion Chief Robert Bohack as a director of FSU. He brings knowledge and years of service from the FDNY to help improve DOC's fire safety. We continue to allot resources as permitted to fire safety improvements. While I was not working at the department at the time of the NIC fire, I'll do my best to answer any questions.
I just had one question. You indicated in your background that you seek to bring standards up to HHC standards.
Yes.
Okay. Could you talk about, does that involve capital improvements?
As you guys know, we don't have any capital funds on Rikers since the closure of Rikers had removed all capital funds. And that's why also it's been hard with the EMTC rec as well. We have to do all this out of our own expense budget and trying to find the funds. Some of the projects that I've actually done, we've had to reallocate monies from different other projects, such as the NIC fire pump, which is $2.5 million. We had to reallocate when we closed BCBC. So any upgrades that we had scheduled for BCBC, I was able to recycle those capital funds and use them to supply our fire pump and buy the fire pump and do the work. NIC.
And so do you find that the finding of funds will be consistent to meeting the standards that you just set?
As we implore more of these standards, we're going to the city and we're asking for funds. We're working along with DCAS and the other city agencies and sharing. Some of the stuff that happens is because we're turning the properties over to DCAS. If the projects go past the 5 years, which would make it capital eligible of improvements to the structures, DCAS will sign an adjacent form to be partners with us on the project, and they'll absorb some of the costs, which will allow it to be capital eligible. So we're working on different ways and different avenues. We have a whole new finance team working on all this as well.
Okay, if there's no other questions.
I have a question.
Okay, Dr. Cohen and then Board Member Sherman.
Yeah. And the board's report regarding the fire on page 5, it states that that leadership of the department instructed staff not to open the cells and not to have people leave the area of the fire. Could you comment on that and explain to us why, if that was the correct policy, and if not, what you're doing to recommend changes on that?
Can't answer that question. I wasn't at the department during that time. It's department's instructions.
But you've reviewed how the fire was managed.
I'll look into this and get back to you after.
Appreciate that.
Board Member Sherman.
You, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I have two questions. It sounded from your presentation as though there are not current outstanding maintenance requests to repair sprinkler heads. Is that the case? Are there any outstanding maintenance requests?
So on a daily basis, sprinkler heads get broken. So I haven't looked at my report for today yet, but if stuff got broken overnight, it should be being addressed this morning. So that's some of the policy and things that we've implemented with our guys, that it's immediate repair of broken sprinkler heads. And as of yesterday, we were at 100% operation.
Okay, and those repairs now do take place within a day?
Yeah, within 24 hours. And we also, something that was changed was we have all of our engineers, they are all S12 carriers and S13 carriers, which allow them to make the repairs where we're not relying on a city contractor to come in and make the repairs.
And you are monitoring that
Correct.
daily?
Daily.
Thank you. The other question is about, you mentioned the I think a new director of the FSU, is that right? Who
Yeah.
came from the fire department.
Yeah.
I just wanted to also understand what the overall staffing of the FSU is today, and if there have been recent changes to that, or there are plans in the works to expand that unit or change the composition of that unit.
Yes. So again, since I came on in May, there's been changes made in the FSU. It's the compliance and the basically ensuring all of the fire and life safety systems falls under my department, which is the sprinkler heads and then the FSU, which is the fire safety unit, which is more the boots on the ground, if you will, daily training, the COs. That falls under DC Brereton and security. That's who Robert Bohack, the retired battalion chief, reports to directly, and he's ensuring that there's correct training, unified way of responding to fires across the whole system, and also work with the FDNY on a daily basis to ensure that our staff is trained correctly along to some of their standards, and as well as inspecting our buildings and looking into our facilities.
Thank you.
Hi, DC Bed. I just want to make sure that I understand. So since VCB's closure, I understand you're able to divert planned investment there elsewhere. But I don't know how else to phrase this. Is VCBC still DOC's problem? I mean, are you responsible for that boat, that boat's maintenance? Or is that being transferred to DCAS because of the closure?
No, so we still currently hold CBC actions with CBC could redirect City Hall.
But it's currently still under DOC's control, and that's true for other closed facilities as well. And that's a City Hall question. Okay, thank you.
Good.
On that note, I mean, do you have a decommissioning unit for the facilities that are closing?
What regards?
Yeah, and in my former experience in the state, we had to close 21 facilities. So we, throughout the year, we created a decommissioning unit. I mean, it's got amount of work.
No.
People don't realize to close an institution and to keep it safe, and particular negotiations with, in your case now with the city, because never heard about how you are tending to that significant amount of work.
So there are different parts of each different facility that participates in closing facilities, and when they're decommissioned, they're zeroed out with the some CLC, and then we maintain the systems in the building because we can't abandon any buildings or just up and leave. So put minimal staff on that's necessary to maintain the facilities, fire life safety equipment working, so that the buildings aren't. It's a lot of work, and
I agree, but thank you for bringing that up. I may have more further questions in the future.
No more questions for the department. We thank you for your comments and statements today. And now we'll call on CHS for updates.
I can give just an overview of what CHS is going to present on before you do. So I did mention at the beginning of today's meeting that the board's second report and recommendations on 2023 deaths in New York City DOC custody was published on February 9th, 2024, and is available on the board's website. In 2023, 2 out of the 9 deaths in custody occurred by suicide. There have been a total of 15 suicides in custody since 2020. In 2020, 1 out of the 7 deaths in custody occurred by suicide. In 2021, 6 out of the 14 deaths in custody occurred by suicide. In 2022, 6 out of the 19 deaths in custody occurred by suicide. And as mentioned in 2023, there were 2 suicides. As stated in subdivision A of section 2-04 of the board's rules, adequate mental health care is to be provided to people in custody in an environment which facilitates care and treatment, provides for maximum observation, reduces the risk of suicide, and is minimally stressful. And the board has asked CHS to provide an update on its suicide prevention practices and programs, so I'll turn it over to them now.
Hi, good morning. Deepan Subedi, Chief Medical Officer for Correctional Health Services. And I believe we have some slides. Great, thank you. So I want to thank the Board of Correction for giving us an opportunity today to speak about what we're doing on the clinical side to reduce the risk of jail suicide. Next slide, please. So this is obviously a really big topic, so I'm going to try to be broad, thorough, but also concise. And I'm going to start by discussing the risk factors associated with jail suicide nationally, because I think it's important context. That information is really what informs our approaches to managing suicide risk in the jail setting. Next slide. So I think it's first important to recognize and point out that jail detention is associated with psychological distress. And this is at a kind of population individual. So individuals who are detained in jail are separated from their community and associated disruption. So, family, friends, have work or ways of coping with stress, such as exercising. All of that is suddenly cut off. In addition, jails in general are associated with higher levels of violence. So individuals who are incarcerated are only at risk of being victims of violence, but also witnessing violence. And that can, of course, add to stress. And I think lastly and importantly, in addition to the above, individuals who are incarcerated in jail have the uncertainty of their case looming above. I think that has a real differential corrosive effect, just not knowing what's going to happen to you. So you're in a setting where there's higher levels of stress. You're in a setting where you don't have access to usual ways of coping. And so that naturally will facilitate psychological distress. And I think of it in two separate ways. So first of all, what we see is, I would say, non-specific anxiety and mood changes. So individuals can have sleep disruption, anxiety, sadness. Because we may not have access to our usual ways of coping, then people come up with new ways to manage stress. And I say adaptive and maladaptive because sometimes people have to find ways of coping that we would say is not appropriate in the community, but may be required in the jail setting. So for example, substance use, or maybe self-injury without the intent to die, just in terms to help regulate them. In addition to that, and separately but related, we see worsening of existing mental health conditions and potentially onset of new mental health. Next slide. And jails, and that shows in the data that jails, as it relates to correctional institutions, are specifically more traumatic and induce more psychological distress than other correctional settings. So this was put out by the Bureau of Justice Statistics several years ago. And what they demonstrated was that the rates of psychological distress for jail detainees was higher than those who were in prison. Yet the rates of mental illness were the same in both settings. So although we often talk about mental illness driving psychological distress and suicide in jails, I think it's important to recognize that there are systemic environmental issues which also induce kind of psychological suffering and distress. Next slide. And I believe that's also reflected in the jail suicide data that we have. So this is also put out by BJS, and on the top line, you'll see the rate of jail suicides, I believe 19, and then you see state and federal prison below that. And what you notice is that the rates of jail suicide are much higher than in prisons, both state and federal. I think that just reinforces the previous slides, which again, reflect how jail is uniquely stressful and difficult for people. And that's also reflected in the community data. So it's a little hard to see here, but this is also from BJS, and that the rate of jail suicide is much higher than community rates. And that's for matched controls. So not only is, and to summarize, the rate of jail suicide higher than prison and federal and state prisons, but also in the community. And then we had COVID. So this is, in addition to my previous slide, during COVID, individuals who were incarcerated came from communities who were differentially impacted by the pandemic. So there were a lot of concerns for themselves and loved ones. There's restricted communication and access to family, friends, and attorneys, and I think that was general for all of us during that time. And there were case delays related to court closures, and there were jail-related disruption. But I think every organization and system was experiencing disruption, and that includes our jail, every jail, hospitals all around the country. So what's already a difficult situation with stress becomes more stressful, and then what you expect is more anxiety symptoms. And I think that's reflected in the suicide rates that we saw, or numbers. I will say that, prior to the pandemic, there were low single-digit suicide numbers in the system. We saw a significant increase in 21 and 22, and then last year had fewer suicides. So next slide. So really what I'm going to do next, just with that overview, is talk about what we've done and what we're doing, both longitudinally, but in response to the pandemic to try to keep our. So just think about general principles. I'm going to go into some details, but in terms of general principles, the first step is early identification and risk assessment. We want to identify any mental health issues or needs early on incarceration. It's also an opportunity to establish a relationship. What we know in terms of suicide is that individuals feel isolated or disconnected are more likely to commit suicide. So just having some relationship with the mental health service I think is important. We also treat reversible mental health conditions. So for example, anyone who may have symptoms of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, ensuring that they're receiving the right treatment for that diagnosis. And then again, because the jail can be very unpredictable and the suicide risk for an individual can change so quickly that we have ongoing monitoring and escalation plans in place that we can be sure to respond to changes in suicide risk and then respond appropriately. So this is a big overview of what we do. So starting off, like I said, the focus is to identify individuals with mental health needs early. Starts at new admission. So I didn't include that here, but as many people know, the Department of Corrections first screens every single individual coming into the system for suicide risk. That guides referrals to CHS. But in addition, both nursing and medical staff also screen suicide risk on intake. So that's the first step, and that guides referrals to mental health. For any individual that's not captured on intake, like we said, it's important that we have a lot of post-admission referral pathways. So that includes 311, health triage, Department of Correction, BOC. And so we have open pathways for communication to ensure that we identify individuals. And anyone who's an acute suicide risk is immediately seen by mental health. In terms of the mental health evaluation, the focus is obviously identification of mental health needs and treatment needs. And part of what we do, in addition to prescribing medications and determining how much treatment or therapy someone should have, is decide in which setting that treatment should occur. General population clinics where someone can be brought to a clinic for treatment versus mental health therapeutic housing units where we provide treatment on site. And generally speaking, individuals who may have serious mental illness or have a harder time managing symptoms in general population are placed in the mental health therapeutic housing. And wherever you are in these settings, on intake and on all clinical follow-ups, whether it's in GP or in our THUs, we have suicide screenings at every single encounter. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. So just going into a little bit more detail, like I mentioned earlier, we focus on suicide screening and risk assessments. We use the modified Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, so that's been validated in the community. So we translated a little bit for the jail, and that's on intake. There's a full screening, and then on follow-ups, we also use the. What's a little different, though, is that in addition to screening, that we include guidance for our providers in the actual forms. So there's kind of continuous education and reinforcement of escalation pathways and interventions when you fill out the screener. So that's something that we've put in place for the last couple of years. We also have targeted evaluations for every self-injury. What that means is, in addition to the usual care that occurs at the time of self-injury, so getting medical treatment, being seen by the mental health provider, and receiving appropriate treatment, we then follow up with an individual and process the self-injury. And in retrospect, triggers, maybe they have changed how they're thinking about things to both help with ongoing risk assessment, but also develop new potential. And those reviews are signed off at multiple levels. And for anyone who has a suicide attempt, that's reviewed by Central Mental Health and Central CHS clinical leadership, and then discussed on a monthly basis. And then lastly, and I think this was exciting, we recently developed a new tool we call the Mental Health High Risk Dashboard. I think for a lot of those who navigate medical records, there's just a lot of information buried everywhere, and sometimes it can be hard to find the high yield information. So this is a dashboard we created where you can click in someone's chart and it aggregates relevant high-risk mental health information. That includes SI status, medications, self-injury, and PACE placement. So, you're meeting with someone and they say, I have no history of mental illness, I'm not on medications, and then you click on this and see a lot of information, it gives you an opportunity to say, hey, look, what about this? And then treatment planner. And the new data shows that a combination of a clinical assessment as well as using objective aggregate data is kind of the best way to approach suicide risk screening. So I think this is very exciting that we've been able to. So in terms of suicide watches, this is also an important intervention in our setting. So CHS staff initiate suicide watches through a TNF, or a transfer notification form. That's the way we let DOC know that someone's on suicide watch. The department is responsible for the direct observation. And then on top of that, anyone on a suicide watch is seen twice daily by those meetings are conferenced daily with the supervisor, and everyone who's being discontinued must also be discussed with clinical. So the frame here is that there's a low threshold to put someone on suicide watch, but there's a higher threshold and escalation to ensure that the proper risk assessment is. And so here's just some data I'll throw at you at the end. So we talked about mental health referrals at intake. So this is by quarter, looking at the percentage of medical intakes or on intake, how many individuals were referred to mental health. So the bar graph is the number of medical intakes. The line is the percent of intakes that were health. We changed to a new medical record at the end of 2019. So this is right before the pandemic. We don't have a lot of pre-pandemic data, but as you can see, generally speaking, the rate of referrals on intake are about anywhere from low to mid 40%. So, a little less than half of intake are referred to mental health. Next. And as I mentioned earlier, things in jail can really change quickly. And so it's important that we have mechanisms to obtain new information if someone's situation has changed and the risk assessment has changed. And that's why having the post-intake referral pathways are so valuable. So this is just a bar graph, demonstrating all the referrals that are coming in from external sources, external meaning non-CHS. So there's patient relations, that is the dark blue, health triage line, which we've discussed several times, orange, and then the blue line are Department of Correction referrals. So you'll see that there is anywhere from around 800 additional referrals coming in for mental health patients, in addition to the routine care that's occurring, and the vast majority of that is coming to us from our partners in Department of Correction. It highlights the relationship. And here's just a quick last data slide, just looking at the volume of suicide watch encounters. Like I said, everyone on suicide watch is seen at least twice daily by CHS staff. That's in addition to the additional other routine care that's occurring. And so you'll see that on average, it's anywhere from about 2,000 to 2,500 visits a month that are occurring solely for suicide watch. That's in addition to all the other routine care occurring. And on average, about like 200 individuals. So that just gives you a sense of the volume of work that's occurring specifically around suicide. And lastly, I think it's important to reinforce that suicide prevention, although CHS presenting today, is a collaborative effort. And so we rely closely and work closely with our colleagues in the department on this. As I mentioned earlier, correction staff complete a suicide screening on every admission. Also refer patients to us post-admission when there's been changes in mental status, and involved in officer education around that. That's for crisis intervention training, and there's also been some additional ad hoc trainings that we've been involved in. We also rely on the department for monitoring and surveillance. So on therapeutic housing units, monitoring occurs at a higher frequency than in GP units. And of course, individuals with suicide watch are also monitored by the department. And the department also manages the SP program, which is an important peer support program for individuals. And lastly, we have, meet regularly with the department to discuss ways to improve in our system. So that occurs through the Suicide Prevention Task Force, which meets monthly, and also a subcommittee that meets weekly. And the goal of the task force is to look at data, discuss systems level issue and policy changes that may be required, but also on a weekly level, weekly basis, discuss individual cases, how to learn from those. And lastly, there's the joint assessment and review. That is also a joint DOC-CHS meeting where we discuss every death in custody, including suicides, and then try to identify if there are any systems level interventions involve both agents. And there's a lot more, but these are that I believe it for my presentation. I'm happy to.
Thank
no,
you.
sorry, there's one more slide. Sorry. So just in summary, jails are associated with increased psychological distress and higher suicide rates. I think there's a lot we can do to mitigate some of these risks of jail detention, but I think there's a reality that clinical interventions alone cannot eliminate the environmental and legal stressors that precipitate distress and the higher suicide rates in jails. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Really good. Thank you. And I think I've asked this question at least 5 different times, and another commissioner left, but I think you kind of really highlight in this presentation all the efforts that are individualized to manage people who could be suicidal. At the same time, you actually end talking about the importance that it cannot be done on your own, and talking about the environmental factors and the reality of being in a system that actually has no predictability and is perfect a recipe to ruminate and think, and not in a positive way. But we were talking before with the commissioner, and she sounds like really enthusiastic about thinking differently about stuff. And we brought up like how we're bringing credible messengers to talk to the potential correctional officers about bringing more people with lived experience. What are you guys doing, which I asked again 3 other times, about really focusing not just on the individuals, but actually focusing on them? We're not going to fix this one by one. It's about a review that actually provides opportunity to connect, regulate your emotions. I mean, I think everyone is in the same boat, including the correctional officers. Is there an opportunity to do something that will actually work to make it better for everyone, instead of you guys just trying to solve one thing at a time in a reactionary way?
Yeah, great, complicated question. That's probably why we had difficulty answering it the other 3 or 5 times you've asked it.
To be fair, it's not a question to you only. I think it's
Yeah.
a question to many stakeholders.
Yeah.
There's a significant amount of resources that are actually embedded in trying to deal with mental health. None of them are coordinated. There's something that I've learned at Rikers is that the work that is happening around DBT in the programming side, the work that is happening in the school around counselors, the work that are happening with you guys, which is fantastic. None of those things are actually pulled together.
Yeah, so I think just to step back for a moment, I think this issue is not specific to Rikers, and it's every jail setting and every correctional setting, and that there's a difference between, let's say, clinical interventions and non-clinical interventions that impact people psychologically. And so I do think part of the regular suicide task force meetings are to discuss systems level issues, and part of that is, defining where we're hitting the limits of a clinical intervention and discuss other interventions. So that includes not only officer education, but we talked earlier about rec, programming in terms of making sure that people are occupied. So that we are having ongoing discussions with DOC is the focus of the meeting. Psychological support interventions.
Before you comment, I just wanted for the record, I think you indicated that the department commissioner left. She is still here. Yeah, yes. Just for the record.
Glad to see you back there. Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen systems with as many sources, well intended to support individuals, when in reality you're managing a situation that actually is not conducive to including the staff. And hoping that maybe in 2024 you could think in a more environmental milieu way.
Yeah, absolutely. We have been. I think both departments.
Please.
Board Member Bedard.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm wondering if you can just talk more specifically about the experience of Suicide Watch. I'm interested in sort of when somebody comes to your attention and you decide to elevate them to being placed on Suicide Watch, what that transfer looks like, what that experience is like for the person, and then how you determine that they're ready to come off.
Sure, I may ask the department to fill in some details, but I think in general, when we're evaluating someone at risk for suicide, obviously looking at recent history, looking at what someone is saying about their suicidal ideation attempt, looking at objective and subjective information as well as reviewing the history. So we take in a lot. It's a full evaluation, not just what someone is saying in the moment, but we're looking at someone's history too. And I do think that, like any clinical intervention, you want to weigh the risk benefits. To be clear, anytime we're not sure, we round up to suicide watch. We don't want to take a risk in our setting. But that, suicide watch can be humanizing and disruptive experience. You may be taken out of a housing area where you have colleagues and friends that you're build relationships with. You monitor all the time. You may not have access to materials that are helpful in terms of emotional equilibrium. So I think we consider that and discuss that with that determination. But you're weighing both things. In terms of determination to come off, like we said, the value of frequent suicide watch is that we just have a lot of data over time in a more controlled setting. And so, what we look at is, again, objective information to see how the person is doing. Are they looking at the test? Are they engaged? Are they smiling and talking to other people? And then also how they're reflecting on what originally led them to be placed on suicide watch. And so I think we use all those factors, and our suicide watch templates, when you discuss someone, they're structured fields that you have to go through to ensure that you're considering everything, including someone's strength and protective. So not just looking at what's resolved, but how someone is going to manage that differently. And then on top of that, it's reviewed by supervisor. So it's not just on the individual provider level, but there's also supervision. And what's nice about that is that's, again, opportunities for ongoing education.
Just overall, in your process, two quick questions. How would you rate the effectiveness of your suicide prevention approach?
Every death is a tragedy. Really, really clear about that. What I will say is that, and it's hard to compare us with our systems. I want to be careful comparing us to other systems. But what we saw is that prior to the pandemic, we had very low numbers in terms of suicide. Generally safe to say that it's probably lower than other jurisdictions, although I, not compare that one to one. There was an increase during the pandemic. I didn't point this out earlier, but the last year we have national data for is 2019. No national data on suicide, jail suicides in 20, 21, and 22. But I will say anecdotally, if you just Google or read the news, it does seem like in any all correctional settings, especially urban jails, that there's significant suicide, and that those increases actually have been sustained through 2023. So I will say, although we had an increase in 21 and 22, there was a decrease in 23, and that what I've read, again, is anecdotal, and what it seems like is there sustained increases in other settings. So that seems to imply that there has been some change. Now, what's driving that is multifactorial.
And last question, in your sort of decision-making process, do you have like PIC input into sort of like eyes on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we, obviously we cannot share protected health information with other individuals on the unit. We do monitor how individuals are engaging with their peers. So I think that way there's indirect evidence, but we're not, asking individuals, I don't think, right, just system standpoint, it's not our protocol procedure to be asking, one detainee how the other person is. That may not focus on objective information. We do, of course, coordinate with the officers on the unit, but we also have a lot of staff on and off the who are monitoring the patient.
Thank you. Any other questions, board members? Dr.
No
Cohen?
question. Yes, thank you for the presentation, Dr. Sabiti. I've always asked you your questions about what's changed, and I was very pleased. I mean, very impressed with the work that CHS is doing right now. And I have some questions. So the national suicide rate during COVID went down dramatically. Yours went up. There are age issues which I couldn't, pull out of your presentation, and I don't know if you've had the chance to look at that. But I was wondering, my first question is, was the availability of clinical and security staff an issue in terms of the increased rates of suicide during the height of the COVID pandemic?
I think I would defer to my colleague.
I can hear you. I can't hear.
That the board has also conducted death reviews, and I think also discussed factors that. So I kind of defer to the board. And
Well, I mean, I've been involved in some of those reviews, and one of the questions, and I'll make this a question to you. I mean, you evaluated all these deaths internally and with the department. We have generally found that there was lack of availability of observation of people who died in the jails, and include suicide. Is that your observation as well?
like I said in the earlier slide, like any environment functioning and levels, I think risks, and that's also demonstrated.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions, board members? So thank you very much. Go ahead.
Just off this topic, since so many people have acknowledged the reopening of the D11 unit at Elmhurst, I do want to mention that has been long awaited. Do greatly appreciate McGinley Liddy. She and I had a direct conversation early on about the importance of this unit, and really appreciate that she was able to get the department to staff that. But in the meantime, for those 4 years, the work, the extraordinary work during some very intense times, mainly by the Correctional Health Services staff, the clinicians there, in partnership with the State Office of Mental Health and Elmhurst Hospital, managed all the acute psychiatric needs of women for 4 years in absence of acute psychiatric beds. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Okay, no further questions. We'll thank you, and we'll ask Koba to address updates. This is Koba for updates regarding staff concerns.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Second of the correctional officer. And I'm here today once again to talk about the reality. By correctional officers, wow. Couple people. Jails. I wanted to update you on some current stats that myself, my partner, Koba, have been tracking since the. So since January 1st, over 70 officers have been splattered with unknown substances. This number does not include assaults on civilians and medical staff who also share the same fate. I'm the board member assigned to NIC and West. 2 weeks ago, 2 of my members were splashed, assaulted with feces. So what the detainees are doing is they're storing in bags, cartons, wherever they're storing it. And when the officer is touring, subsequently they're, committing this crime, this act, right? We all know that when you are assaulted in that manner, does something to you physically,
emotionally. It's happening far too often without any real accountability. Any real accountability. Additionally, there have been over 70 still fires by the detainees. These dangerous acts put the housing area officers and the other detainees that are housed there safety in jeopardy. Most often during my tour and when I respond to these areas for these incidents, the detainees are doing it, and I hate to say it, but for fun and not really understanding the magnitude of what they're doing and the lives that they're putting, don't understand. And still fires and fires on a whole is definitely a serious issue. It's ongoing. My members are doing the best that they can to abate these situations, to attack and to rectify situations before it actually escalates. Feel at times our efforts go on deaf ears. The number of assaults of correction officers, civilians, and medical staff has been alarming. There have been over 30 serious injuries among detainees due to stabbings and slashing. So, SRG fighting amongst one another. They're seriously injuring one another. They are secreting homemade weapons. From where? I don't know. We're having a hard time. Although the department is trying to commingle them, they're having a hard time getting along. And when they have a hard time getting along, the correction officer on the floor is having a hard time managing the hard time. What's even more alarming and concerning is the rising of the number of sexual assaults on correction officers. Since COBA has been tracking the sexual assaults, it's been 60 incidents, 57 females and 3 males. This year alone, we had 2 sexual assaults. On January 13th, at the West facility, a detainee grabbed the officer's buttocks as she was touring, an unprovoked attack. On January 15th, in OBCC, an officer was conducting her tour, and without warning or provocation, the detainee punched her a closed fist in the face. Blinded by the incident, she tried to utilize her departmental issued chemical agent to cease the detainees from attacking her. However, the attempt was unsuccessful. The detainee continued to beat her. The detainee continued to beat her. Her injuries, a fracture of the nasal bone. January 25th, a detainee used the back of their hand to touch the officer's groin area. Another unprovoked attack. On February 16th, in OBCC, a detainee advanced toward a female correction officer and placed her in a chokehold. Another unprovoked. These statistics and assaults highlight the urgent need for better safety conditions and real accountability for infractions committed by the detainees while they are incarcerated. Despite reading every BOC special report and recommendation, I am disappointed to say that not a single recommendation has been made to address the issue of sexual assault on correction officers. Not one single recommendation has been made to address the physical assaults on correction officers. Every broken eye socket, every broken nose, every stitch to close a wound, every crime committed against a correction officer has gone unaddressed by you, the BOC. This must change. Which brings me to address Board Member Cohen. The board released an assessment of the use of force chemical agents in New York City jails. The BOC made 14 recommendations to address what I call the alleged use of excessive and unnecessary force in the jail. You stated this report covers only 1 month of unnecessary, inappropriate, and dangerous overuse of chemical agents in the jails. The department's failure to prevent this dangerous practice contributes substantially to the violence in the jails. It must end. Board Member Cohen, I find your comments inaccurate and incredibly dangerous. Authorized chemical agents are used to defend oneself, defend another employee, visitor, to prevent serious crimes, to maintain safety and security of the facility, and to enforce departmental rules. It is crucial that you and everyone on this board, city council, stakeholders, are extremely cautious and mindful, making reckless statements while sitting behind a desk without a care in the world. In an environment where officers, civilians are physically assaulted daily, there's no room for second guessing and criticizing life-changing decisions without present or fully aware of the circumstances of the incident at the jail is a high risk and volatile environment where split-second decisions can mean the difference between life and death. There is no room for behind-the-desk judgment. So in closing, officers on the front line, civilians and medical staff face dangerous situations on a daily basis. We deserve support and understanding rather than criticism and speculation. It is important to remember that unless we have been in our shoes, you cannot truly understand the gravity of any and every decision made. Instead of criticizing, you should be finding ways to hold the detainees accountable for the chaos and the violence that they are creating while incarcerated. We must stop the insanity. We must stop the selective activism. You all are here. We're here for real change. I know I am. I know my partner is. I know some of the advocates are. So we must find ways where everyone is held accountable. Everyone. Everyone. We're all human, right? We make mistakes, and it's okay to admit, yes, we made a mistake. Yes, this is not working. But to continuously hammer, to continuously degrade, to continuously blind because you choose to be. When correction officers are putting themselves on the front line each and every day, it's disheartening, it's troubling, confusing, it's unfair, it's unwarranted. So I say to you today, as I've been saying for the last, we have an opportunity, this is the beginning of the year, we have an opportunity to try and get things right. We have an opportunity to be fair, firm, and consistent for everyone. I'm a correction officer and will always be a correction officer. I'm in my 20th year. I still tour the jail, still have the respect from the detainees, and I give them. So I'm just asking for a little more, because correctional officers are doing much more. And I'll turn it over to my partner.
Okay. I'm sorry. Once again, good morning. My name is Antoinette Anderson. I am the correspondent secretary of the Correction Officers Benevolent Association. To add on to what my partner said, she gave some stats. I have some as well. From 12/20/23 until present, we had 108 assaults on staff. Every day somebody comes to work and is getting assaulted. We have 12 serious assaults, which she mentioned some, in which officers had to receive surgery. We had 19 spittings. Do you know how it feels to have somebody spit in your face and you have to continue to work? 89 splashings, as she's mentioned, urine, feces, whatever concoction they put together. This is what we're dealing with. 3 sexual assaults. Once again, since we've been here and we've been out advocating, we do not come to work to be sexually assaulted. None of us. 39 slashings. This is P on C on POC on PIC. Some things that we can't control. 25 stabbings. One which was downgraded to a serious injury. 71 serious injuries to inmates from other PICs. This is what we deal with on a daily basis, and your report as well troubled me as well. You guys come and you tour and you leave. We live this. We live this. This is our jobs. This is our livelihoods. We are, and I'm going to continue to say it, even when I retire, are the forgotten law enforcement. We deal with all type of populations, and we are forgotten about. For every chance that is taken, we are being shot at. Like, our jobs are not important. As my partner mentioned, yes, we make split-second decisions. Can you say that you would act the same if you was flashed? Can you say that you would act the same if a PIC touched you in an appropriate manner? Can you say that you won't freeze in the midst of watching another PIC getting stabbed or slashed in front of you? Cannot, because everybody acts differently. I'm here to speak about an incredibly important issue impacting our correction workforce. A workforce that is the most diverse uniform force in the city, half whom are women. A couple of weeks ago, as my partner mentioned, we had a officer in doing her job and touring and removing an article from a cell door was punched in her face. That's a problem. Because if you're doing your job and if you go in the facilities right now and you tour an a PIC punches you in the face, how are you going to react? Every incident in which we react, we're talked about. We're wrong. Not anyone on this board can say if you toured and a PIC came towards you and punched you in your face, would you not react? You don't know how you're going to react. So why every time an incident happens, you criticize the officer? We had another incident that my partner also mentioned. The female officer was put in a chokehold. How are you going to get out of that? Tell me, please, because we work in this environment every day. And when we react in that minute, when the breath is being taken from us, we're being criticized. We had an incident that happened on the 18th, where the officer was sitting at the desk doing her job. And a PIC walked up to her and threw hot, scalding water in her face. Now tell me, how would you react to that? The same PRC in January did the same thing to a male officer in another facility. Now, we come up here and we hear stats from all agencies. This is not the first time I've said that Rikers Island is a dumping ground. We have to deal with individuals that have mental issues that we cannot accommodate all the time. How do you tell this officer when she goes home and look in the mirror that the scar is not going away on her face, that you're sorry? You can't. When this specific individual has done this before, something has to change. Everything cannot be the PRCs because we didn't ask to have hot water thrown on us. I had an incident at one of my facilities where a PRC had hot water thrown on him. That was not an easy sight to look at. It is not. Not only are you dealing with mental issues, now that is not placed on that victim, because now he has to look at his face every day and see what happened to him. She has to look at her face every single morning before she comes to work. What is in place for the officers? Because we know what's going to happen with the PRC. He's going to get compensated. What is in place for the officer that now has to return back to work and work in the same environment? Any comment? No suggestions? Since December 2023, when the City Council voted to ban punitive segregation, since December 20th, we've mentioned we had 3 more sexual assaults. So I stand before you today and I ask each BOC member to commit this board to launching a full report examining how the city can better protect all of our officers from being victimized by repeat violent offenders in our jails. Once again, the individual that just recently threw hot water on a female officer's face did the same act in January. There has not been one single report issued by this body examining and recommending how to enhance our safety and security. How can you sit there and talk about fire safety all day, but then ignore the inferno of violence against our essential workforce? When will BOC stop to show and start acting? We call on the BOC to immediately mandate DOC to track these arsons and rearrest them. That's disgraceful. That's disgraceful. The city charter mandates this body to oversee the welfare of everyone in our jails. Yet every single BOC report that comes from this body is exclusively focused on protecting the rights of PRCs. How do you justify this one-sided advocacy? We want everyone in our jails to feel safe, as so should you. So I ask again, when can we expect a report examining the ongoing threats to our safety and security? Please give me the respect of a response. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your updates. I just must say it's, very impactful and very, very, very thoughtful. Just in my response and just taking in information from the board and staff over time, and your concerns about staff, coverage in reports and other things of that nature. I'll let you know that I've had even conversations up till this morning on how, as a board, we are going to look at a strategy to approach that, to be more active or and responsive to our charter, to take each and every person working and living in the jails in New York City into account. And we are going to hold that charter very seriously. I know there's issues with regard to maybe and concerns regarding collective bargaining and crossing certain lines. But just like anything, it's not, none of this work is easy. But the health and well-being of all members and all living and working in the jails, it has to be taken into account. So, Vice Chair Hoskins.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. I just want to respond to the part about not understanding how you. I can attest bodily fluids does do something. The way you respond, you don't know until you're being human and find that. So I want to acknowledge that. But I also want to acknowledge that, as Chair stated, our goal is what are the minimum standards for everyone who work and live. I think we have been around collective bargaining unit, what are the barriers with. Bottom line, there are minimum standards around safety and I know as a member that we have been is going to talk. She has started, but that's ultimately the goal. Is not just custody. It's people who live and work, because the thing we know is the people who work there feel safe and are treated humane. They treat individuals who live there.
Thank you for your, both of you, for your report. And not to be the odd man out, but I was uniformed, so I'm going to have to say I agree with absolutely everything you just said, everything. And I want to make this statement, and I think that the presentation given by CHS supports this statement, and that is jail is an unnatural environment. Human beings were not created for it. And animals were not created for the zoo. Okay. And I pray that one day, maybe our society will think of another way of handling criminal justice problems. But for right now, this is what we have, this is what we're dealing with. And being on both sides between uniform and being on the board, and then engaging with the advocates, all three of us, all three groups want the same thing. And so I hope going forward that we stop with the adversarial behaviors and try as three groups to come up with some solutions. To come up with some solutions to the problems. What?
I have to say this to you.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay. COBA, not adversarial. COBA is not adversarial. COBA is responding to what's being said or seen.
Okay.
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 Let's COBA is not adversarial.
Okay.
But we're going to respond when things are not
Okay.
right. We're going to respond when we're not being perceived in the public in the right manner. We're going to respond. So if anyone is taking this as adversarial,
Yes.
I apologize, but it's not. It's the
Okay. Maybe I used the wrong word. Maybe I used the wrong word.
Yes, but
Or
before you continue, Board Member Betts, before you continue, please, those in the audience, outburst during discussion and testimony, if you can, refrain from it, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, each group has something to take issue with. Maybe that's better to say. Each group has something to take issue with from their perspective. And so I guess what I'd like to better say is synergy. I'd like to see more. I'm hoping going forward that there will be more synergy.
Yes. And I've been doing so for the last. Wait.
Everybody, yeah.
I've brought incident, issue to the board via telephone, via email. We've done our part. And we'll continue to do our part. We're just asking for that same leverage. That's it. And the presentation regarding psychological traumas of debt, incidents that happens in the jail, that was a great piece. The correction officers
It was excellent.
shared
Excellent.
the same face. That was great. It was great. So I say that to say that most times when I leave this meeting, it's like we testify and we go about our day. Today, that piece from CHS is something that we're going to go back and talk to our members about because it's important, and that's what the care unit is for. That is, I believe, what the grant to help officers with psychological trauma. So I'm very happy that piece, very much so, because it can help the correction officer. It can help civilian staff. It can help training that misbehave.
I'd like you to, Ms. Anderson, submit to me in writing, email me what you're asking for us to research, how to protect officers and PICs, you know, the language surrounding it. You know,
Yes, ma'am.
please, thank you.
I also have something to say. I think that as someone that's been a correction officer for 18 years, going on 19 as my partner for 20, for a long time, the issues of revolving sexual assault and sexual harassment was not being addressed. And as a rape survivor, it is something that's very important when we work in these type of environments to have the support of DOC and now CHS. It's very hard for somebody when they're sexually assaulted on the job to want to speak about it. But sometimes it makes them where they can't go back into that same environment because they're reliving that trauma. So I just would like for when you make your reports, take that into consideration because sometimes in our upbringing, we don't disclose everything that we go through, right? As well as the PICs. We don't know everything that they've been through. But when certain behaviors are done, we get certain reactions. And once again, in a split-second decision, sometimes you can't react the way if you would have relived that situation, you would have thought second about when you're placed in certain situations. So as my partner asked, and I have not responded yet to that report because we have a meeting coming up on the 13th. I do have a response. I think that sometimes in you guys making recommendations, you have to look at both sides, not just one. Thank you.
Dr. Cohen, any comments? Okay. Well,
One of the things that the bylaws allow was some, and I know this may sound strange to other people, but I have experienced people who have formerly incarcerated individuals, call it courageous, non-traditional. But I think in this situation, how do those come together and have a conversation to look at what the recommendations can be from both perspectives, right? Because if the reports are being one-sided and our charter is for people who work and live, how do we actually work effectively to ensure that our reports are coming from a party, which I think is fair, right? So as a committee, I'm recommending an ad hoc committee that allows formerly incarcerated individuals from the community. Now, with filling, I'll chair that committee, but with COBA. Will chair.
If someone can craft sort of a motion that takes into consideration so that we're in line. I think there's a couple of attorneys on bench here, so, and then we can sort of make sure it's what we are all in consensus with and move to a vote, and this can take place after public comment and after you finished your testimony. Any other questions for? Yes.
Not a question, but I really hear what you said today. I'm following the vice chair idea of having like a work group of some sort. I will encourage the department and COBA and others just to do it with those who are impacted, with those who are in the prisons. I mean, it seems that, the officers have a clear sense of how they want to be treated. I'm sure inmates have a clear sense of how they want to be treated. Will dare you to try to find at least one unit where you can work together.
I
appreciate that. And I'm still waiting for women in the jail.
Just,
Initiative. So before we go there, have to figure out what we're doing with the women in the jails as far as sexual assault, the women in the jails as far as officers. So before we do that, to finish what we started.
and we intend to, there have been, for the record, some BOC staffing. A number of staff had left and we're tooling back up. But women in the jails is of high priority for me. More than 50% of staff are women, PICs. You have to address that. You have to, and Ms. Pitts and I talked about it a little earlier. We will press staff a little bit further, even with the staffing challenges that they have, to at least have a timeline where Women in the Jails Committee can continue to meet and information is flowing. And reports are generated that address the concerns of women in the jails. Any other questions? Yes.
So I just wanted to request that staff be able to take back what Board Member Hoskins just proposed and to develop a resolution for a motion for the board to vote on at the March meeting so that we are able to discuss with Ms. Hoskins and COBA and CHS and DOC just what should go into this ad hoc committee. And we can also discuss the women in the jails, the goals of the Women in the Jails Committee, and figure out staffing for that and provide an update at the March meeting.
If that's friendly among the board members, then, that recommendation is taken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I need to bring tissue next time because, yeah.
Yes, get it ready.
That's serious, Okay, public comment. We will now hear comments from the public. So, yeah, Executive Director Jasmine.
Yes, first speaker we have is Michael Klinger. And we ask that you sit right up here on the podium, one of the chairs right there.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Michael Klinger, and I'm a jail services attorney with Brooklyn Defender Services. Thank you for the opportunity to share some comments today. We appreciate the board's publication of the report on the dangerous and unsanctioned reliance on chemical agents, and we look forward to the March meeting when this will be a topic on the agenda for the department to present on. The board's focus on indoor and outdoor recreation today also highlights a routine failure of basic compliance with the minimum standards by the department. The minimum standards we reviewed require that individuals in the department's custody receive adequate indoor and outdoor recreational opportunities. More specifically, requires at least 1 hour of outdoor recreation, weather permitting, 7 days a week, all year long. In inclement weather, it's 1 hour of indoor recreation. The department is required under the rules to provide the same recreation opportunities to people in restrictive housing as in the general population, which in turn means everyone currently in RESH or in separation status housing at NYC. The only limitation, as we've discussed, is for individuals who may pose an imminent safety and security risk, and even then, it must be approved by the chief of the department, and such access can only be denied for up to 5 days. Lack of recreation, though, is a persistent problem. For example, since December 1st, our office has relayed concerns to the board and the department about a lack of daily access at GRVC, RNDC, OBCC, EMTC, NIC, and RESH. In some cases, including at OBCC and EMTC, we are aware of whole housing units that have gone more than 2 weeks without access to outdoor recreation. And just this week, we heard that the dorm housing unit at EMTC 12 Main gets access to recreation for only 1 hour each week on Fridays, and even then, only indoors. We heard from a person housed in that unit that he's been outside only on days when he's gone to court or to the hospital. For many incarcerated people, the lack of access to recreation is part of a broader pattern of access to other essential services, as we've noted today, including showers, law library, medical and mental health services. This was particularly the situation at RNDC in early December, where we're aware of multiple extended lock-in periods during which people were held in conditions essentially equivalent to solitary confinement for periods longer than 24 hours. In another recurring example, when one person's meal slot is left open on a tier at RESH, the department withholds all programming or other access to out-of-cell time, to mail, to law library for all people on that tier, rather than simply having DOC staff close that slot. This de facto lock-in often lasts for hours and sometimes for a full day. It is not necessarily helpful to parse the lack of access to daily recreation when it is merely one more indication of the department's inability to meet its required minimum standards. The norm and the exception are routinely swapped. People go for days or weeks without seeing the sky. We urge the board to monitor access to recreation not as an individual measure of compliance with the minimum standards, but as an example of a department that is unable to satisfactorily perform its most basic obligations.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rachel Snyderman.
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Schneiderman, and I'm a corrections specialist at New York County Defender Services. Before I begin my prepared remarks, I just want to comment on the opening of D11 in Elmhurst Hospital, because a lot of attention has been given to that in today's board meeting. and it should be acknowledged and celebrated, but I also think it's important to note that 80% of women currently in Rosie's are treated for mental health issues. There are currently 365 women and gender expansive people in Rosie's, and only 7 of them are in Elmhurst. So I just think that's important to note. Today, I want to talk about fire safety practices and suicide prevention, specifically in RESH. My hope is that my testimony will underscore the necessity to urgently begin planning for the implementation of Intro 549A, the recently passed legislation that bans solitary confinement in New York City. In late January, I visited 3 of my clients who were at the time in ESH, and each of them, one after the other, shared the same story. In the days before my visit, there was a person in their unit who repeatedly asked for a glass of water and was ignored. After hours of negligence, he eventually set a fire in his unit. And I want you all to think about the level of desperation that would cause you to take such a drastic measure to set a fire in your own unit. The CO assigned to this unit came to the cell, put out the fire, but still refused to bring him water. And this cycle continued for hours. When the last fire was set, the CO chose not to put it out, allowing it to ravage through the unit for over 20 minutes. Meanwhile, one of my clients was in the day room for his scheduled lockout, which, as you're all aware, requires being chained to a desk. The fire blazed and smoke filled his lungs. However, with his ankles chained to a chair, he could not escape from the fire. This event and others indicate that we cannot currently trust the department to adhere to mandated fire safety practices. However, under Intro 549A, with increased lockout time, allowing for people to drink water without the help of COs, it is my belief that this situation would have never transpired in the first place. Next, I want to share another story about someone who was in ESH at the beginning of January and subjected to a 72-hour lock-in. Thankfully, this client is no longer incarcerated, but at the time, because he was subjected to extreme and prolonged isolation in RESH, he tried to hang himself. He was accosted by COs who came into his cell and immediately sprayed him at close range with chemical agents. I was asked by my client why they did that to him, and he explained to me that it was DOC protocol. In fact, this client's disclosure was not the first time I have heard that it is DOC protocol to spray people with mace if they are attempting suicide. I want to thank the board for drawing attention to this practice in their most recent report on the use of chemical agents in the jails, and I promise I'm wrapping up. But my client's experience took place months after the board's reporting, indicating that DOC continues to use chemical agents as a suicide prevention tool. It is impossible to fathom how the deployment of OC spray could be at all helpful to a person in such acute distress that they would want to take their own life. And it's absolutely horrifying that this continues with frequency. Given the level of inhumanity in the current restrictive housing model, we believe that 549 is the opportunity this city needs to reduce the extensive harm and loss of life that incarcerated people face in New York City. But in order for this to be true, the board must be up to the task of actually implementing this crucial piece of legislation. And we look forward to your collaboration and partnership as we determine the best course of action moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jennifer Parrish.
Afternoon. Excuse me. My name is Jennifer Parrish, Justice Center Mental Health Project, member of the Jails Action Coalition and the Halt Solitary Confinement Campaign. The topic I want to speak on was not on your agenda, but I believe what I have to say dovetails nicely with what's been said at this meeting. I'm here to urge the board to begin rulemaking so that you can amend your rules consistent with Local Law 42, which was enacted on January 30th. The law requires the department to end all forms of solitary confinement, allow all people to engage in out-of-cell activities for at least 14 hours a day, and separate people who engage in violent offenses in restrictive housing with procedural due process and requirements to make that housing
Excuse me, one second.
therapeutic and
You'll get your time back. Can we get a water, please?
There may be some-
That she's having.
some
Is there
water.
any? Yeah.
very kind of you. It actually still fits with exactly. All right. So the City Administrative Procedure Act has specific requirements and timelines for you to conduct your rulemaking. So you have a limited time to do this. The new law has to be implemented by July 28th. So we're urging you to do this right away to begin that process. And I assume that's going to require forming a committee, drafting rules. So as soon as you can get started on that, that's crucial.
If it's available.
Also, you do so much more than that, because the board and the department should seize this moment to turn the page on the punitive approach that's characterized the New York City jail system for far too long. Instead of solely focusing on restrictive housing, the board and the department should consider what is needed to prevent violence and to begin with. This requires changing the culture for incarcerated people and staff alike, and providing an environment that's centered around human dignity, respect, and safety. So for people who are incarcerated, that means ensuring some of the things we've talked about at this meeting, that people's basic needs are met. That includes water and also recreation and clean linens, as we've talked about before. It also means increasing programming and other pro-social activities and providing incentives for people to engage in positive behavior. Why couldn't people have things that would actually have a positive impact on their criminal case that's pending? And we need to change, and we can't change the whole jail culture without improving conditions for correction officers, civilian staff, and health staff who work in the jails. I hope that COBA and other unions will be part of bringing about this new approach. Certainly requiring people to involuntarily work double and triple shifts is unacceptable. And how can staff who are exhausted and stressed provide the environment that we want to create for incarcerated people? And this also means that we need to decarcerate. Reducing the jail population will enable the department to do more with the resources they have. The city significantly reduced the jail population during the pandemic when they felt it was critical to do so. So there's no reason that the city, meaning prosecutors, judges, the mayor's office, Department of Correction, and the board working together can't do it again. It's simply a matter of recognizing the urgency to do so. Over the years, we've had reforms to the use of punitive segregation, but we have never moved away from the punitive system that prevails in the jails. I encourage the board to be part of making this happen. I see so much promise in this board to create fundamental change. Already, board member Pitts has been part of getting the academy to include the perspective of incarcerated people in their training. That's certainly a good start. We also have, I just request two extensions, sorry about that. We also have a new commissioner who said she's committed to leading with empathy. She's still here listening to public comments, which has not happened with many previous commissioners, and I hope she will accept our invitation to meet with her. You heard Correctional Health Services talk about the psychological distress that jails make. I think they can be a strong partner in this process. For years, the department has not been able to remedy the excessive use of force and violence in the jails. Even though there's been a court order and a monitor who has a lot of correctional experience engaged involved with the process, I think it's time to go in a completely different direction. For instance, Dr. James Gilligan, who this board has engaged in the past, he's a psychiatrist who's worked in maximum security facilities, and he's researched violence, researched the underlying causes for violence. And I think his findings are important for the board and the department to examine. So I'm just going to read, let me read a couple of sentences from this because I think it's so crucial. It says, I've not seen a serious act of violence that was not provoked by the experience of feeling ashamed and humiliated, disrespected and ridiculed, and that did not represent an attempt to prevent or undo this loss of face. The purpose of violence is to diminish this intensity of shame and replace it as far as possible with its opposite, pride, thus preventing the individual from feeling overwhelmed by those feelings of shame. To me, this rings true, this feeling of being disrespected. You heard it at the beginning of this meeting. You heard it from
time, I have
so
to
I
ask you
hope
to.
that you'll sincerely use this opportunity to turn the page on this system. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, just before we go to the next public comment, Ms. Snyderman, your concern about, no, Ms. Snyderman, your concerns about not enough perhaps beds that are similar to address Rosie's concerns. We have those concerns as well. So you should note that, and those concerns continue, and we will look to continue to address it and find better ways to mandate that services be provided. Ms. Paris, you should note that our team is currently working on the council's law, and so there should be something coming out in short order to address that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Akiana Smith.
Good afternoon. My name is Akiana Smith. I am representing the Beyond Rosie's campaign under WCJA. I want to bring to the board's attention to the issue of reentry and specifically of housing. Our information is specific to the population with whom we work with directly, the women and gender expansive people housed at the Rose M. Singer Center. But based on what we're hearing, we're concerned that this may be an issue that reaches further. Either way, it requires immediate attention. When a person in Rikers applies for housing upon release, for that process to progress requires docs to set up a VTC meeting with the housing provider. Again, this is something that the individual applying for housing cannot do themselves. It is solely docs' responsibility for the housing process to proceed in time. They need to be scheduled as early as possible, ideally as soon as housing referral or application goes in. We've been hearing complaints of docs delaying or completely failing to schedule those VTC meetings. This is extremely alarming. Without that meeting, the housing application process stalls completely. It is delayed indefinitely, or even just for too long, people will find themselves unhoused or bound for shelters upon release and far more vulnerable to re-entering through Rikers' revolving door. In a situation where we struggle to find housing for everyone who needs it, there is no good reason that people should be cut off in this way from access to resources that exist and are available. On the last count, DOCS employs over 26 individuals. Fewer than 500 are currently detained at the Rose M. Singer Center. Surely some means to exist to make sure that DOCS does the bare minimum to allow incarcerated people to find housing before their release. In the meantime, we urge the board to return to the Path to 100 report in which WCJA, in collaboration with Lippman Commission and the Data Collaborative for Justice, outline a path to strategically decrease the population of people incarcerated at Rose M. Singer Center, a process that is especially critical when DOCS is unable or unwilling to provide essential services to facilitate re-entry in even the most basic way. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Darren Mack.
Good afternoon, Chair and all members of the board. My name is Darren Mack. I'm a co-director of Freedom Agenda, and I'm also a member of the Jails Action Coalition, and I'm also a survivor of Rikers Island. So I'm here to testify and make it clear that we all believe in the right to be treated humanely. The protection of human rights is a bedrock principle internationally. Unfortunately, for far too long, corrections have violated the human rights of people in their custody. For years, DOC has failed the people in their custody to the extent that a class action lawsuit ushered in a federal monitor over New York City jail. Since then, conditions have deteriorated and a record number of people have lost their lives. I hope with a new commissioner, things will turn around for the better. One of the reasons why the Board of Corrections is critical in our city is because one of the least transparent and least accountable agencies in our city continues to cause harm on some of the most vulnerable and marginalized people in our city. That agency is the New York City Department of Corrections. Firstly, I want to echo board member sentiments about looking into redacting the calling complaints of people in custody. As stated today, even in the court of law, witnesses and people who are harmed in a case, their identification are redacted. We must remember that the majority of people in DOC custody have not been convicted of anything. They should be presumed innocent until they have their day in court. People in custody are there pre-trial and should be afforded the same rights to avoid retaliation. I also want to dispel the false narrative about staffing in DOC. As the Federal Monitor reported, there's not a staff shortage problem in New York City jails. There is a management of staff problem in New York City jails. According to the Vera Institute for Justice, quote, in 2022, DOC had approximately 1,500 more correctional officers than people in detention. In contrast, in 2021, the typical American jail had a uniformed workforce roughly 1/3 the size of its jail population. Although absenteeism has declined slightly in recent months, DOC's uniform absence rate remains more than triple pre-pandemic levels at 17.4%. This is an outlier compared to other uniform workforces in New York City, notably almost 4 times higher than the NYPD. Lastly, for the public record, under this mayoral administration, there has been a 41% increase of people with mental health challenges in DOC custody. This is a policy decision. It's clear that DOC uniform staff believe that people with mental health challenges should be getting treatment and not jail. We just heard today, just stated today that they can't accommodate people with mental health issues all the time. And too often that has led to deadly consequences. I conclude by saying I encourage COBA and especially uniform staff to demand that the mayor implement the recommendations submitted by the Criminal Justice Steering Committee last year that could address some of the issues around mental health and people in their custody. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Chaplain Dr. Victoria A. Phillips. Dr. V.
Can you hear me? Houston Black, Chaplain Dr. Victoria A. Phillips, Dr. V, a member of the Jails Action Coalition, member of everything, but today I'm speaking directly for myself because I ain't asking my permission about what I'm about to say. But before I start, I just want to remind this boy, you know, we still waiting for PREA updates as well when we talk about sexual assaults actually do occur against detainees as well. And for years, I actually fought to actually have the detainees' voices heard on the record. And I've said it on the record before, and I have to say it again today. I did not fight for them to be identified. I fought for their voices to be heard so that they could be a part of this meeting. But we all know that it's unsafe for the booking and case numbers units to be put out for the public to hear. So I just want to also say, once again, I'm forced to use my time on the record to address the lack of leadership and professionalism throughout New York City Department of Corrections. Today, I pray that you hear my distress, take heed to my warning, and begin to pave the path for a new beginning. Walk with me for a moment. I promise not to waste anyone's time, but I must address this urgent matter on the record. For decades, I have been a woman of my word and assisted many individuals and families on both sides of this conversation, including uniformed officers. It's a unique respect I've earned over the years. I've survived too many storms to be brought fearful of rain. Let me just put this down. The commissioner said something today that stood out to me. She mentioned empathy, fairness, and accountability. Over the years, Jails Action formed in December 2011. Before then, I worked behind the walls in nursing, cognitive behavioral therapy, at the Mental Health Project, Urban Justice Center, some forms of monitoring, and also I wear a hat as a chaplain. I say that for a reason. Because over the years, I wore these many hats when I showed empathy, when I've helped officers' mothers, when I helped wardens' sons, when I've used minutes at press conferences to actually speak on women concerns. As a rape survivor, I know what it's like to be on a unit unsafe. And so when I use 2 minutes and I use 60 seconds at a press conference out of my 2 minutes, and I actually speak out for officers that are still being left in units with no break, no bathroom break, having to utilize detainees to actually go to the bathroom, to me, that's a problem. So I don't mind sharing whatever time I do have to advocate in that way. Another example around for fairness, right? I've over the years, I've actually I brought this up at the last meeting, and I want to bring it up again because what the second and third vice president of the officers union don't realize is that the officer that I spoke about on the record previously of yelling city hall steps, vulgar things and all that stuff is an officer that I was so fair that in the hallway before I even spoke to this board on the record, the officer was in the hallway by the elevators at 125 Worth Street. And please give me a second. And I actually told this officer, I want to talk about you. So whoever, it was 6 other officers around him, 5 males and a female. And I told them when we go back inside, don't stand next to him when I talk on the record. That's fair because I knew I was getting ready to point him out as a bad officer, as someone who said the vulgar things, even to a city council member who testified about that. And I didn't think that it was fair to have anyone else around him. That's fair as an advocate. I didn't have to do any of that. And I say that because I don't get treated the same. I have union members that show up at press conferences and stop. They don't organize anything on their own. And at the last meeting, for years, I have dealt with the second and third with Vice President Cobra being rude, unprofessional in many ways. And you as the board, you have seen, even at the last meeting, after I got off the record testifying, how they were responding in the audience to me. And this cannot go because as soon as the meeting finished in January, and I want to say at this meeting the night before, I told Mr. Williams' family he probably should not even come. They probably should not even come because they wouldn't be able to speak to the board and receive what they probably wanted to receive. Ms. Williams died this January. And I told them that because of how everything is done, how the system is ran, that his mother probably would feel more injured. And I'm so happy that I spoke up and they didn't come because even before I could even leave the room, after testifying, I remember your name now, the second vice president, Keisha Williams, walked up on me, literally, as this pole is as close to me. And as I was walking up, I was going to introduce myself to the new commissioner. And as I was walking up the aisle, she ran up on me. And I turned around. She was so close to me that I didn't even have space to make personal space with my cane. That's how close she was to me. And I remember I had to look up at her because she's so tall. And the first thing I noticed was her green. The first thing I noticed was her green eyeshadow, but then also her anger. And then I noticed her words. Because I'm going to hurry up, Chair, but you know this occurred. So please let me put it on the record. So she told me, do something. You ain't gonna do nothing, you coward. And I said, what are you talking about? I said, you so unprofessional. And I still walking up the aisle. And she said, do something. And then reached over my head and did like this. Wave her hand, go ahead, you're not gonna do nothing. And so I'm putting this on the record because one, I'm not a coward, I'm an army brat. I don't fear anyone but God. 2, it's unacceptable. And so when we talk about accountability, what does that really look like? Because board member Pitts, I've even talked to you about how officers act. And I've talked to you about issues with women. And I would love to follow up with you. But at the same time, the Thursday before the last meeting, I actually sat down with Benny, another person in this room, another person that he brought. That conversation that y'all say needs to have, start with the people that have the actual thing. I told you, Chair, that I was going to have that meeting. I told the then Chair of the Criminal Justice Committee that we was going to have that meeting. And we didn't have it in December, but we had it the first week of January. 4 days before this lady approached me in a threatening manner. And what I want to point out is that if a union leader does not have enough enough professionalism to hold herself together when someone has testified on the record, she's breaking the law. And Chair, if you can't do nothing, if Benny won't do something, I'm going to have to teach you all what leadership means in this city.
Okay, thank you. Let me
Any questions?
no, thank you.
Okay.
One, I think that comments should stay. You know, I don't know how to categorize it, but just as PICs testified earlier about officers and things of that nature, that board members had some issue with their identifying, and some had identifying the names of officers as well. I don't want to see that continue, and that's why we're looking to meet with Corp Counsel to see if we can keep names and booking numbers out of these testimonies. And so I don't want it to carry over to even other public comments. Because you know, I've always tried to maintain a calm environment, not a hostile environment, but order and process. And that's very important. So I know that COBA wants to respond, but please, I ask that you restrain from responding, you know, at this time, and that we just move on to the next public speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Scott Paltrowitz.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and for everyone in this room's work. Thank you, Dr. V. Thank you today. There's a lot to talk about today, but I'm going to focus on echoing next steps regarding implementation of Local Law 42. This historic law builds on the efforts of this board over many years toward ending solitary confinement and utilizing alternative forms of separation scientifically proven to reduce violence and better support people's health. So I look forward, along with our colleagues, to working collaboratively with the board, the department, CHS, COBA, other staff, anyone who is willing to work together to ensure that the law is implemented effectively in a way that will reduce violence and support people's health and well-being. And as a first step, I do want to just reiterate that we do urge the board, I thank you, Chair, for acknowledging this, to begin the rulemaking process to ensure that the board's minimum standards comply with the new law. And as another step to ensure effective implementation of the law, I also wanted to encourage the board and the department and CHS to bring in additional outside experts, help design and operate true violence reduction programs. Experts like one that was mentioned earlier today, Dr. James Gilligan and Dr. Bandy Lee, they have decades of experience of designing and operating successful programs that have not only improved people's health and well-being who are incarcerated, but also dramatically reduced violence and made the environment better for staff, for people who live in these facilities, and for outside communities after people returned home. I'm just going to give one example. You've heard us mention this before, but Dr. Lee and Dr. Gilligan helped design and operate the RSVP program in San Francisco jail. That program had participants who had previously committed sexual assaults, physical assaults, other violent acts. Within 1 month of the program, the number of violent incidents among participants dropped to literally 0 over an entire 1-year period. This is the kind of transformation that needs to be done right now, and this is an historic opportunity with this new law to do that. So let's bring in, they're willing. They've already acknowledged to us they're willing. Let's bring in Dr. Gilligan. Let's bring in Dr. Lee. Let's bring in other experts who can help design these type of programs so that we are actually making a real change, protecting people's health and well-being, and reducing violence and saving lives. The last thing I'll just say is that I hope that the board, the department, CHS, COBA, everybody in this room fully embraces this change and fully embraces making an actual transformation that's going to benefit everybody. It's going to make everyone safer in the jails. It's going to make everyone safer in our outside communities. And I thank you for the time and the opportunity And I do want to just, last thing is just reiterate my support. Dr. V, I apologize for what happened. That should be stated on the record. And I don't know the specifics, but that does not seem appropriate. And I just wanted to share that I hope that this
Could you
board.
please finish?
Yes, I will.
No, please, that's it. Right.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Appreciate the
Yes.
time.
I just want to say before we, I'm gonna get ready to go to online, but let me just state that Dr. V, out of your testimony, comments, I did hear PREA updates. That's very important to the board. We did lose a staff, and now we have someone assigned to work on PREA, and we're looking to hire an additional staff person. So look for, more reports and intervention in regard to PREA concerns. Now we'll go to our public comments online.
Thank you. The first online speaker is Kelly Grace Price.
Hi, sorry, it's Gracie Price.
It says mute on Kelly Price, and the timer has not started.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, I'll be brief. First of all, I just wanted to say, I'll turn in some written testimony today, but at the root of all these problems has been the staffing issue. And to hear, and remember, we're still waiting for the tool. DOC doesn't even have a way to track which officer is in which post at what unit in real time, and they keep promising that they're developing a tool to track that. I remember Commissioner Magnelli promised you in September of 2022, when she was just an employee in the law department, a deputy commissioner, she promised delivery on that tool. We're still waiting. So to hear her say today there's another tool in the works to track minimum standards, Bahui, really, we need to hold their feet to the fire, especially on this tracking tool. We already know that units without B posts are deadly units. Your own reports have reflected this over and over and over. I'd really like to see this issue highlighted and at least a few questions asked of the commissioner regarding this issue in the future. Thank you so much. I'll turn in written comments. Kelly Grace Price, close Rosie's.
Thank you. The next speaker is Kayla Simpson.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry. Good afternoon. I'm Kayla Simpson. I'm a staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society's Prisoners' Rights Project and one of the counsel to the plaintiff class in Nunez. I'm glad to be with you and welcome to the new BOC staff. First, I want to turn to suicide prevention.
Ms. Simpson?
Yes, sir.
1 second. Could you reset her timer? She started at 1:30. So thank you.
I'll always appreciate the time. Thank you. It is, of course, valuable regarding suicide prevention to think about how the jail setting in general and COVID contribute to suicide and self-harm. But I think we do a dangerous disservice to the discussion if we aren't acknowledging that DOC isn't a typical jail setting, that it is deeply dysfunctional on a basic level. Routine failures in staffing housing units, affording services necessary for health and well-being, well-documented deficiencies in supervision. And of course, as we all work to change that, any approach to preventing harm in this setting has to reckon with those realities. And I want to note that the federal court in Nunez had to order the department to ensure that staff follow their own suicide prevention protocols. And that was in September of 2021. Of course, people kept dying. Self-harm continued at alarming levels. And then 2 years later, last year in August 2023, the court had to issue another order
requiring DOC to engage an expert to evaluate policies related to suicide and self-harm, and to identify deficiencies in both policy and practice. And that expert's report was to be completed by December 31st. And I'm a little concerned that we're not hearing anything about that important work today and what the city is doing in response. And of course, just want to note that I think we need to hear from DOC on this issue also. We can't meaningfully address suicide and self-harm without engaging the entity that controls operations of the jails, that holds the keys to the cages. Second, I just want to say a quick word about the chemical agents report issued by the board last week. First, a sincere thanks to the board, and in particular board staff, whose diligence and thoughtfulness really leapt off the pages. There were some very important themes there. First, that being sprayed with chemical agents is no small thing. It hurts, it's dangerous, or it can be. And second, that DOC staff reflexively and routinely reach for it to solve problems that force doesn't need to solve, which is in violation of their own policies and the Nunez consent judgment. And I want to note quickly, and I know I'm getting short on time, but hearing the defensiveness of the COBA representative today, I think only underscores the need to examine that reflexive response. Of course, the jails are dangerous. Of course, staff are human beings within that dangerous setting. But gratuitous force by staff is an enormous culprit to the danger in the jails. And attempts to address that isn't unwarranted criticism. It's necessary. And I also feel compelled to note that the charter explicitly tasks the board with focusing on minimum standards relating to people held or confined in DOC. And of course, staff concern should inform those discussions. I certainly don't oppose that. But there are many forums in the city in which staff may raise concerns. Other government bodies tasked with addressing employment conditions. But I think it's important to note that people in custody do not have that same access or those resources. So I just want to note that, and I'm sure we'll discuss that more next month. But thank you for the report. We need more reporting like that. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Eileen Mayer.
If you're speaking, we can't hear you. You might be on mute. Cannot hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Good morning. My name is Eileen Marr. I'm a civil rights union leader from Vocal, New York, a social worker, and a survivor of the earthly bound hell that is Rikers Island, where I spent over 427 days as a detainee. Before I begin, I'd like to express my condolences and prayers to the family and loved ones of Mr. Manuel Luna, a detainee murdered by New York City DOC on or around January 20th at GRVC on the island. Only a couple of short weeks after the January 4th only a couple of short weeks after the January 4th DOC murder of Mr. Chima Williams, another detainee at EMTC. And for any detainees that have been murdered while in New York City custody and their names and identities have yet to be released, know that our prayers and fight belongs with you as well, and somehow your names will be amplified. Today it was discussed that the detainees' daily recreation is rarely held due to staffing issues. However, it has also been emphatically stated on numerous occasions that detainee Mr. Williams died on January 4th, 2024 during a pickup basketball game during what else? Recreation. The same recreation that is not occurring. It has been intimated to me by a staff member that said that the murder did not take place during rec, since rec is non-existent. So which is it? In addition to this, detainees in custody continue to be murdered murdered, medical needs are simply not met. And now that in addition to a 3-year-old New York State law barring solitary confinement, coinciding, and now a brand new New York City law was passed, one would think that DOC would have waved the proverbial white flag and ceased from using the now supersized illegal practice altogether. Instead, as of last night, they have not. Individuals have remained in the Bing units at Rosie's, EMTC, and GRVC since mid-2023. And like the medieval torture chairs, DOC shackles detainees to for days on end. DOC has been pepper spraying the most vulnerable detainees while mid-mental health crises and suicidal ideations. What is wrong with you? Torture of the detainees or anyone else is not, I repeat, not in your job descriptions. Every month we come here to these meetings and the like, and we spell out in a kindergarten level fashion how to deal with and remedy the blatant human rights violations on the island and the boat, many of which are resulting in premature deaths. Clearly, DOC is not capable, nor have they ever been, of doing their jobs. It is time to hang up the jersey and step aside. And in conclusion, 3.5 weeks ago, while on 8th Avenue in Hell's Kitchen, it was a Sunday, I was walking down, as per my usual, when a New York City DOC bus filled with DOC officers threw open soda cans, water, I hope, wet paper towels, rocks, and other garbage at me as I walked past their bus. They were, along with other so-called law enforcement, were participating in a vehicle-themed action of some sort. I'm not sure what for. I do know that I was called junky white trash bitch, spat at, and said, this is for you, you dumb bitch. So that's what happened to me 3.5 weeks ago by DOC. This is your DOC. Shameful, just shameful. Thank you.
Very much. Mhm.
Thank you. The next speaker is Robert Camacho. The next speaker is Daniel Gerard.
Can you all hear me? Thank you. Chair Sampson, Executive Director George Villa, and board members, I'm Danielle Gerard, a senior staff attorney at Children's Rights. We are a member of the New York City Jails Action Coalition and advocate on behalf of young adults incarcerated on Rikers. We support what the advocates have said regarding the other topics, but we're testifying today regarding recreation and the April fire. As the Department of Correction is well aware, recreation is critical for the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of all people, including incarcerated persons. Minimum Standard 106 codifies this importance, as was read into the record this morning. The importance of meaningful recreation time is not only emphasized by the department, but also prioritized by the American Bar Association and the United Nations, whose rules provide that every prisoner who is not employed in outdoor work shall have at least 1 hour of suitable exercise in the open air daily if the weather permits. The rules are based on an abundance of academic and medical research documenting a strong positive association between moderate or vigorous exercise and mental or physical well-being, and conversely, the strong association between inactivity and mental or physical health. Access to recreation is particularly important for young adults. A key part of their maturation process is access to outdoor regulation. They, young adults, desperately need access to this resource for the interminable amount of time they spend on Rikers. Furthermore, as with programming and education, recreation is critical to reducing violence and use of force on the island. It would go a long way toward addressing the concerns department staff testified about today. As you heard this morning, incarcerated persons are being denied access to recreation for as long as a year. This is, once again, as Ms. Price mentioned, a staffing issue caused by both COBA itself and a lack of coordination by department management that board member Franco emphasized regarding mental health services. Regarding the fire, we call on the department to address the numerous failures that led to the fire at North Infirmary Command on April 6, 2023. It's unfathomable that NIC staff shut off the sprinkler system water supply to the housing area. And on top of this, that the department does not know how long the water was shut off prior to April 6th. This failure, coupled with many others, led to detrimental consequences for every person incarcerated at NIC. On behalf of the young adults and all those incarcerated on Rikers, we urge the board to hold the department accountable to address these failures. We urge you to join us in advocating to close Rikers by August 2027 in accordance with the law. The matters before you today once again underscore that the island is irredeemable. As the oversight body responsible for city jails, please make it possible for every incarcerated person on Rikers to have access to recreation. Please make it impossible for human beings to be locked in cells while fire and smoke billow around them. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Okay, thank you. So that's all we have on the WebEx list for public comment, but if there's anyone else who is online that signed up to testify, is not called, please let us know now. Okay, thank you to everyone who attended and participated in today's meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled to take place on Tuesday, March 12th, 2024 at 1 p.m. A location to be determined. At this time, I'll take a motion from any board member to adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor? Opposed? Without hearing any objection? Someone said aye? Yeah, no. Without hearing any objection, the meeting is now adjourned.
Well, this was a good meeting.